this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
With the all-new Audi Q3, the answer is always yes. Yes to adventure. Yes to escape. Yes to right now. The all-new Audi Q3, made for the yes life.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Running a business is hard enough. Don't make it harder with a dozen apps that don't talk to each other. One for sales, another for inventory, a separate one for accounting. That's software overload. Odoo is the all-in-one platform that replaces them all. CRM, accounting, inventory, e-commerce, HR. Fully integrated, easy to use, and built to grow with your business. Thousands have already made the switch. Why not you? Try Odoo for free at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Cool Zone Media.
Hey everybody, Robert Evans here, and I wanted to let you know this is a compilation episode. So every episode of the week that just happened is here in one convenient and with somewhat less ads package for you to listen to in a long stretch if you want. If you've been listening to the episodes every day this week, there's going to be nothing new here for you, but you can make your own decisions. Welcome, everybody, to It Could Happen Here, a podcast about it happening here, the slow crumbling of the institutions that make up our society. And that includes not just the good stuff that's become the bad stuff, like, for example, Google search, but it includes the stuff that's always been bad and has gotten worse, like life inside the prison industrial complex, which is partly what we will be talking today, because our guest is the great Cory Doctorow, activist, writer, author of a book called The Bezel, which is a fiction novel, but deals with some very non-fictional stuff in relation to how finance ghouls have changed life for people behind bars. Cory, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. It's a delight to be on again.
Yeah, it's always wonderful to have you. I just finished The Bezel. It took me, it was one of those about a day, in part because I just didn't want to stop reading it. I just kind of blasted through. I picked it up in the morning on a walk and then was done with it at about 9 p.m. So I found it pretty compulsively readable.
Amazing. That's great to hear. I with the first one, I knew that I had something going on when I woke up at 2 a.m. and my wife was sitting up in bed next to me. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I just had to find out how it ended." So,
yeah. And you said the first one. This is the second book in a series based around a character, Martin Hinch, who's a self-employed forensic accountant. I do want to let people know right at the jump, I actually have not read your first Hinch book yet.
And they don't have to be read in order.
Yes, yes. That's what I was going to point out. Before we get into the stuff about the plot of this book and how it relates to some very real things that are ongoing, I wanted to talk about a not-so-stealth advertisement within the series for a guy that we're both a big fan of, Stephen Bruce. There's an extended digression where Martin is sending books to a friend of his in prison, and you talk a lot about Stephen's Taltosh series, which was a huge influence on me as a young person. I could definitely see, I think, an influence on this series as well.
Yeah, I mean, Steve is a wonderful writer, and everything he writes is amazing. That particular series, he started when I was 13 years old. I'm now 52. Mm-hmm. I just had dinner with him in Minneapolis. He tells me he's 2 books away from finishing it.
Yeah.
He had planned the whole thing all those years ago. He's a Zelazny protege.
Yeah.
And also a giant Fritz Leiber fan. And it's got that wisecracking Robert McGee kind of, or Travis McGee rather, kind of affect, those books, and also the stuff that I love about the best of what, disparagingly we could call men's adventure fiction.
Yeah.
Which is that it at its best, and Maria Farrell just wrote something really good about this on Crooked Timber. At its best, that stuff really geeks out about a lot of stuff. That the bad version of it is the kind of James Bond version where it's like, this is what the status watch is, and this is what the status martini is, and this is what the status whatever it is. And that, you call that the gourmet version, right? Where it's like, what all the best of everything is, and how to signal, your Verblin goods to other people, how to signal that you are posh and upper class. But the good version of it is the gourmand version, which is like, if you're going to eat cardboard pizza, this is the best cardboard pizza. Yeah. And if you're going to, like the very best gas station toilets are, and the one thing that you should always do if you're staying in a flop house is, right. And it's just that kind of, it could be like street smarts, but it's also very, I want to say self-indulgent, but that's not the right word. It's very, there's a lot of self-care in it. There's a lot of like deliberate, like, oh, this is how I'm going to live my life so that it's as good as possible. And I enjoy all of the finer things as much as I can. This is the thing that I do when I'm making a burger so that it's a 10% more delicious every time, that kind of thing.
It's interesting. I came across the first book in that series that I read was Dragon, which I came across a strip cover from my uncle who worked at a bookstore. And that's his like military fiction book in the series, which is very much in line with the like boys' adventures stuff. But as the series goes on, it increasingly trends towards like Russian revolutionary literature too. There's a little bit more of that, which I think had an influence on me.
Well, Steve's a Trotskyist. And the thing about communist fantasy writers, there's a few of them. There's, China Mayville and Steve and a few others, Will Shetterly and so on, is that the one thing that they can always be relied upon to do is get the ratio of vassals to lords right. Yeah. That the number of peasants in the field is always vastly larger than the number of lords in the castle. And they all have a life and an interiority and a reason for being there that's not just being scenery or cannon fodder.
Yeah, it's something he does well. And I think that's enough of a digression. I just always love having a chance to talk about Stephen Brust's work. Let's talk about The Bezel, because the basic, I mean, I will try not to give away more than is in like the Goodreads summary, but the basics of this story is that you've got this guy, Martin Hinch, who's this forensic accountant, and as a result, he's friends with some people who have, really succeeded in sort of the pre-dot-com bubble tech industry, I'd guess you'd say. And you take us with, he goes with one of them to a place called Catalina Island, which is a real place that was founded by one of like our nation's early plutocrats who had a bizarre obsession with there not being like fast food available on the island.
Yeah, he had a lot of bizarre obsessions. This is William Wrigley,
the gum
the Wrigley
guy,
chewing gum fortune. And his first obsession was chicle trees, and which you need to make gum. And his particular obsession was owning every chicle forest in the world, which he did. Which meant that if you wanted to make gum, even if you were one of his competitors, you had to pay him for the chicle. So there was no gum that wasn't Wrigley's gum in some important sense. This made him, as you might imagine, very rich. Yeah. He bought the Chicago Cubs. There's a reason the Chicago Cubs play at Wrigley Field. And they would have their spring training on Catalina Island, an island that he bought. He loved Westerns. And one of the people who lived on Catalina Island was, or summered there, rather, was Zane Grey, the great Western writer. Yeah. And there were a bunch of Zane Grey movies that were made on the island, including one where they brought over 13 bull bison because they were needed for the movie and because they didn't know a lot about animal handling. Particularly, they did not know that male bison do not ever come into contact with one another except to have a violent dominance clash, which is how the 13 male bison all ended up escaping. And then Wrigley, in one of his other obsessions, thought it was unchristian for these bachelor bison to be on his island. So he brought over 13 cows and created the bison invasive species thing. He also didn't know that bison operate in harems, which was another thing that he was just badly wrong. Like, it is true that like being a billionaire lowers your IQ by 30 points, and being the son of a billionaire lowers your IQ by 40 points.
Yeah.
And Wrigley had all kinds of aesthetic ideas in the same way that when Ford built Fordlandia in Brazil, a planned community that was an identical copy of Dearborn, Michigan, including the south-facing windows, because he wouldn't let his architects explain that south of the equator you want north-facing windows.
Yeah,
he said, "Oh, well, we're he came up with all kinds of weird rules for rubber planters." Rubber harvesters in the Brazilian jungle, and Wrigley came up with his own rules for people living on his island. And one of them is no fast food. And this turns out to be consequential in the story because the protagonist of the story, who's Martin Hench, who's this, two-fisted, hard-fighting forensic accountant who busts finance scams, and his pal are on the island in the party scene while his friend waits to vest from Yahoo, where he's been imprisoned by dint of having sold them a company for millions of dollars, which he can only realize if he can sit tight and not murder any of his colleagues while they buy and destroy every promising startup in Silicon Valley using the money from the royal family of Saudi Arabia that was funneled to them by Masayoshi Son and SoftBank. They encounter a Ponzi scheme, and the Ponzi scheme is grounded in what is an actual practice of people bringing fast food to Catalina Island. Like if you go to the K-12 school and you have an away game, everyone brings back a sack of burgers for their friends because it's forbidden fruit. It's exotic. And this turns into a Ponzi scheme to sell flash frozen burgers brought to the island by various means. And as with every Ponzi scheme, the thing that they're actually selling is the right to sell burgers.
Yeah.
No one wants the burgers, right? They want the downline. And this is why Ponzi schemes always implode. And what Marty realizes is that this Ponzi scheme is going on and that it has been cooked up by this guy whose parties they've been going to, this real estate baron, and that he's done it the same way you might carefully tend an ant colony for the sole purpose of burning them with magnifying glasses. Right?
Yeah.
You build this enormous sort of Rube Goldberg machine, a self-licking ice cream cone, and then you destroy it. You smash it. He's waiting for this economy to collapse once he's extracted every penny from the island, which will add 1% to his net worth. And so they do a controlled demolition of it. They foil this guy's plan. And this kicks in motion the real action in the novel, which is about the private prison system.
Yeah. And I love that in preparing to read this chunk of the book where I learned quite a bit about the private prison system, I also learned a bunch about Catalina Island and this wealthy madman's insane dream. I appreciate that about your books.
Yeah, I mean, Catalina Island, we could go on. Marilyn Monroe is a 15-year-old child bride on Catalina Island. The CIA was founded on Catalina Island. The channel between Catalina Island and the mainland is the deepest channel known to humanity. And Dow dumped 50,000 barrels of DDT into it in iron that is rusting and that we have no way to remediate and that will someday rupture and kill every bird downstream of that channel, and also lots of fish. Catalina Island is this very fraught place, this very beautiful place, very weird place. It's one of my favorite places to go. We just booked another trip there. And everything about it is amazing and also terrible, but also beautiful.
Yeah, and I appreciate the way that you write that, and I appreciate the way that you kind of wrap us into by first establishing this character, this friend of Martin's, who then winds up in a California Department of Corrections facility and taking us over a period of time as it goes to the way I think most people think prisons still are, right? The vision of prisons that was formed from movies we watched in the early 2000s and the late 90s, where, they can be pretty ugly places, but you have family and they can come and visit you, right? There's a big room where everybody gets together with their, Arrested Development's maybe the most, before this all changed, most recent kind of touchstone on this. And also it's a place that has a library, and not just a library, but there are what comes with a library is opportunities for people to better themselves, to learn things, to build skills, to potentially take some more agency of their situation, right? That idea of the jailhouse lawyer who becomes informed and all that. And that world has really gone away to a significant extent. It's not completely gone everywhere, but certainly a lot of that has been pruned away. The ability of prisoners to have face-to-face contact with their loved ones and the ability of prisoners to like use a library is something that is a lot less common now than it used to be. And it's because a lot of these kind of attitudes that have characterized finance for so long are increasingly becoming common within the companies that run these facilities.
Yeah, and maybe this is a good place to explain what a bezel is and how this moment relates to what a bezel is. So I really think the title bezel is a banger, but I didn't realize until I started touring this book that if you say it aloud, it sounds like Bezel, which is the rectangle on your phone screen. It's actually Bezzle. Or ZZ, if you're a Canadian like me. And that is a wonderful term coined by John Kenneth Galbraith to describe the magic interval after the con artist has your money, but before you know it's a con. And in that moment, everybody feels better off. And one of the great bezel moments was the moment between the crash of the dot-com crash of like 2000, 2001, and the crash of the great financial crisis, the housing crash. And in that period, all the money that people put into so-called investments and into the market, and that made them feel better off, made them feel like they had a pension, made them feel like they had savings and so on, all that money was already gone. So this is one of the things about a scam, is it feels like the moment that you lose the money is the moment you realize it's a scam. But you actually lose the money the minute you give it to the con artist.
Yeah.
The con artist might let you keep some of it for a little while, but they can take it away from you whenever they want. That was a moment of kind of giddiness where none of us really wanted the dream to end. We knew that once the dream ended, we would all be poorer, although in reality, we're all poorer right then. One of the things about that moment is it was the moment when another long con came due. And that was the long con of the California 3 strikes rule. So there had been a couple of quite ghastly murders of young people, a teenager and a child in California, that were weaponized by some fairly cruel racists to pass a law in California that says that if you were convicted of 3 felonies, you would go to prison for the rest of your life with no chance of parole. And this is California, which is a place that's quite allergic to higher taxes, famously the home of Proposition 13, where, we can't raise our property taxes unless something like 70% of us go to the polls and specifically vote for it, which is why our cities are so cash strapped. And so in this place where you have these anti-tax extremist types and you have this increasing tax burden associated with locking up an ever larger fraction of the population for the rest of their lives, you have this unstoppable force and this immovable object on a collision course with one another, because at a certain point, you're just going to have prisons that are so full that you're going to have to do something to relieve them. You're going to have to build more prisons. You're going to have to reduce the cost of operating those prisons. Something's going to give. In the end, what ended up giving was a Supreme Court case that ruled that just being in prison in California violated your Eighth Amendment rights against cruel and unusual punishment. That every California prison basically constituted a violation of the Eighth Amendment. And California went through the 5 stages of grieving, which I know they don't replicate. It's not real. That's not really a neat description of exactly what happens when we grieve. But they certainly went through a period of denial and bargaining, including mooting at one point, sending prisoners to like Arizona.
Yeah.
So sending California state prisoners to Arizona and paying Arizona to take them off their hands. And as all of this stuff was going on, some grifters saw a great opportunity, and that opportunity was to cut costs in the prisons and facilitate moving prisoners further and further away from their families by replacing all of the services in the prison with a tablet that you would get for free.
Yeah.
So remember, the iPad comes out in 2008. Steve Jobs is touting it as the future of the world. Media companies are going crazy. They finally found their daddy figure who's going to save them from tech by siloing everything in an app that isn't part of the web, and all we can hear about is how tablets are the future. And this sounds quite futuristic, right? We'll give every prisoner a free tablet. It's like one laptop per child, but for prisoners. And those tablets will replace the library and in-person visits and phone calls and music and TV and continuing education. And all of it's going to cost. And it's going to cost a lot more than you would pay outside of the prison for the same services. So, $4 a minute for postage stamp sized video instead of free Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Music for $3 instead of $1. And then, of course, these companies are very grifty. And so they're constantly restructuring, going bankrupt, being bought, buying one another. And every time that happens, the company changes its name and says, oh, we're no longer the same company. We no longer supply all of those services. We are wiping out all of your data, and you're going to have to buy it again. And so, if that's music, it means that the song that you paid $3 for that you bought by working in the prison workshop for 25 cents an hour is gone, and you're in prison for, remember, this is California, the rest of your life. And so you're going to have to go back and earn more money to get that song again. But also the $5 your kid paid to have the birthday card that they wrote for you scanned, because you can no longer get parcels or mail. Your family have to pay to have their letters scanned, or they have to pay to send you email. And so your kid who's growing up without the principal breadwinner has paid $5 to have their handmade birthday card scanned. That goes away too when the prison changes vendors. And it's a kind of perfect parable for the indifferent sadism of capital, like the degree to which the pursuit of profit drives people to be far more cruel than mere ideology.
That's so important, because prisons were not nice before. They were not humane before. But someone who is simply trying to run a government prison facility would not think of the idea of doing like a shell game yank away of people's music after letting them buy it and then make them buy it again. That's that's not something that a bad prison guard comes up with. That's only something that somebody from finance comes up with.
Well, and it helps if the way that you're running these prisons is by employing guards through a staffing agency. And so you don't even have to contend with the rising costs associated with staff turnover when prisoners go bugfuck crazy because you took all their shit away, right? Those guards are not your employees, and it's not your problem. The whole thing is kind of running at several layers of indirection and remove. It's what Douglas Rushkoff calls going meta. Don't drive a cab, found Uber. Don't found Uber, invest in Uber. Don't invest in Uber, invest in Uber derivatives. Don't invest in Uber derivatives, invest in Uber derivative futures, right? Go meta, get further and further away from the useful activities so that you are insulated from the consequences of whatever it is you do.
And that's it's like a recipe for breaking things, right? Because the people who are closest, not that they're always good at it in the case of prison guards, but the people who are closest to the useful activity tend to know how to make things work, right? Whereas the further away you get from that, the more likely your ideas are to break things that you wouldn't have even thought of. And again, but for that kind of person, everything you break is usually an opportunity for financializing something else.
Yeah, the extent to which finance is the true banality of evil is hard to overstate.
Yeah.
We think, well, we've heard a lot when you read about the Holocaust and World War II, you hear a lot about the cruelty of Nazis, and no one's going to say, well, the Nazis weren't cruel, and the ideological cruelty of Nazis. So, for example, there were moments where rather than transporting troops to decisive battles, they were shipping Jews to concentration camps on those same trains and losing battles so they could murder more Jews, right?
Yeah.
But up the road from Auschwitz was another private concentration camp run by I.G. Farben called Monowitz.
Yep.
And I.G. Farben were war profiteers. They were gouging the Wehrmacht on war material that they were manufacturing with slave labor. And they bought thousands of slaves from Auschwitz, preferring women and children because they were cheaper. And they worked them to death. And the lifespan of a slave in Monowitz was only 3 months before they were worked to death. It was half of what it was in Auschwitz. The conditions were so bad at Monowitz that the SS guards who were seconded to it from Auschwitz wrote to Berlin to complain about the cruelty of Monowitz. At the end of the war in Nuremberg, 24 IG Farben executives were tried for this. Their defense was that they had a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to maximize returns. And 19 of them were acquitted on that basis.
Yeah. God. And this is, before the Chicago school guys had really fully taken over. So this idea that that was really the only responsibility that a business had, even above a moral responsibility, was much less established. The more you get into how many, particularly of the money people, got off at Nuremberg, it's maddening stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
And it is I think an accurate way to look at the Holocaust from the perspective of those guys is the mining of populations, like mining them to death. That's really how a lot of this, because a huge chunk of, especially the early stages of Nazi oppression of starting with German Jews, but going beyond that as they conquered more land, was the appropriation of businesses and property, right? It was mining human beings, and that attitude is persistent, right? It's not just a thing that happens in Nazi Germany. It happens whenever you let people who don't have any sort of human concern take control of every aspect of life.
And this is some of the structural stuff that's going on in the book. So my editor on this book is this great guy, Patrick Nielsen Hayden, who's been my editor since my first novel. He and I met on a BBS in the 1980s. So I've really known him most of my life.
Oh, wow.
And Patrick, when he gave me the editorial note on my first novel, he said something like, the way that science fiction works is you have a world that is like a thought experiment world, and you have a character who's a microcosm for that world. And they are like a big gear, that's the world, and a little gear, that's the character. And if the microcosm meshes correctly with the macrocosm, then as the person spins around and around doing their plot stuff, they spin around enough times that the world, the big gear that they're meshed with, makes a full revolution. So you have this microcosm, macrocosm thing. And often when a book doesn't work, it's because the microcosmic, macrocosmic correspondences aren't sharp enough. There's some way in which those teeth aren't meshing. One of the things that this book tries to do, and that the Martin Hench books generally try to do, because they're all about these finance scams, these high-tech finance scams set in different eras from the 1980s through the 2020s, is that they try to create a series of these similar correspondences between small scams and big scams. They use the small scam as a kind of setup or a frame or like a cognitive tool for understanding the much bigger scam. And so that small scam, that Ponzi scheme, where you have a person who is setting out just for shits and giggles to make some money by destroying a bunch of other people's lives, and viewing those people as not as people, but as things, as a means to an end, and not as an end unto themselves, ends up creating this sadistic, brutal, pointless, and deliberately unsustainable situation that he knows is going to hurt all these other people. Mm-hmm. And the way that he's able to do it is by simply not considering the people who are enmeshed in this scheme as fully people entitled to their own sort of moral consideration. And in the same way, that's like a microcosm for the kinds of decisions that are made when people go on to found these prison tech companies and these other companies that do these ghastly things.
And it's also very accurate to how an unfortunate number of just like regular people in society and in government think about the victims of these schemes. Like when you try to talk about how unfair and how much worse this situation has gotten, it's like, well, they're prisoners. They're being punished, as if that makes it all okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a much more extreme and therefore much more easily spotted version of caveat emptor.
Yeah.
Or, not your keys, not your coins. These ideas that if something bad is happening to you, it must be because you did something bad, right? The kind of providential ethics. And I think that the work that does for people is it helps them put their own anxiety about their own future to rest. Because, if you are worried that something bad might happen to you, and you can convince yourself that the reason that something bad happened to someone else is that they had a deficiency, right? They committed a sin, they were foolish, then you don't have to worry about it happening to you. I a couple of times in the last decade, I have been the victim of various kinds of con. And I am also someone who's written a lot about cons. So I've been successfully phished once, and I had a phone scammer talk me out of my credit card number once. And I always write about it when it happens. And I write about it in part because I want to make sure that people understand that, you're not too smart to be conned. Anyone can be conned and so on. And I think that's an inoculant against getting conned. But I also do it because the reactions are kind of sociological study, right? If you want to see into the minds of tech bros who justify the terrible things that they are doing or planning to do or fantasizing about doing or working on to other people, look at their fraud apologetics, where they say, that was just a business, and you had caveat emptor, or you were lazy, or you were foolish, or like you did something deficient and that's why it happened. And so you deserved it. And that means on the one hand, it's never going to happen to me because I don't deserve it. And on the other hand, if I ever do it to someone else, that's fine, because if they fall victim to it, then they must deserve it. The old con artist saying that you can't cheat an honest man is a version of this.
Yeah, and it's that's like, it's such a limited view of it, right? Because it's true that like there are some cons that you can't trick someone into unless they have a little desire for some larceny, right? But like an increasing number of cons are just like a company using your bank's phone number, calling you and telling you you've been defrauded, and you give them information because you're not used to or somebody calls using the voice of your child and says that they need a ransom payment, right? Yeah. There's not like dishonesty in your heart because you don't want your kid to be kidnapped. You're just not ready for what tech has been able to do, And
while there are some of those cons where they, they're playing on your cupidity or your dishonesty to make money off of you, even in those instances, it is downstream of a system where it feels like you can't survive unless you're cheating, right? Yeah. Like the one of the things, and so multi-level marketing is actually a theme that runs through all of these books. The next one is set in the 1980s, and it's about a faith scam. It's an early PC company I made up called the Three Wise Men, run by a Mormon bishop, a Catholic priest, and an Orthodox rabbi who use affiliate marketing through congregations to prey on their own faith groups. And one of the things about these Ponzi schemes, these pyramid schemes, is that they take the only capital that working people have, which is social capital, right? The relationships they have among one another. And they convince them that it is entrepreneurial and therefore virtuous to instrumentalize your relationship to the other women in your life who help you look after your kids, or to your co-religionists who you can turn to if things go really bad at work or with your family or whatever. And that turning that into a transaction that you can milk, turning those people into a downline who have to recruit other people to make you whole so that you can feed your own upline is just hustling. It's just your shot at the American dream. It's Spike Lee telling you that investing in shitcoins is building black wealth.
Yeah. It is like the fact, and I think low key, this is one of the top couple of problems that we have in this society, because it feeds into everything else. I think that's probably why it runs through so much of your work, because the scam economy is behind and it's increasingly becoming everything, right? And there's this kind of pernicious effect where the more people are victimized by this, both the less they trust other people, and the more they begin to accept that, like, well, this is just how you get by in our society, right? Why shouldn't we take away prison libraries and replace them with more expensive Kindle that we can yank away at any moment? Everyone's always nickel and diming me. I'm always getting more money taken away from me by these same people, and I'm not even in prison, Right.
Why shouldn't there be junk fees in prison if there's junk fees everywhere else? If your local water company that's owned by your city is sold off to plug a hole in the budget because you can't raise taxes, and then they start charging you a convenience fee to pay your water bill with a check, and then a different convenience fee to pay your water bill with a credit card, and a third convenience fee to pay your water bill in person with cash, and then you realize that that none of these are convenience fees. They're just fees.
Yeah, it's just more money. Yeah. We're in a pretty infuriating situation here, and you get to that in the Bezel. You really get that across well, as this guy is trying to deal with and it kind of brought home to me the horror of like having someone you care for in this situation and seeing like their avenues for any kind of relief edged out, chipped away at for the profit of some guy who will never notice the money in his bank account.
Yeah. And unlike Steve Brust, like Steve Brust in some of those volumes, mm-hmm. I told this story from the perspective of a fairly powerful person who's got a lot of agency, mm-hmm. only because it gives you the opportunity to tell a story that at least holds out the possibility of some relief. Mm-hmm. I'll leave it to the reader to find out what actually happens at the end. And, there have been successful prisoner uprisings that have been led by working people who are serving long terms. But for the most part, those uprisings, we never even hear about them. There was a prison labor strike before lockdown. I believe it was 2018 or 2019. There was a national prison labor strike, and it barely made a dent in anyone's consciousness. It was, ultimately one of the largest strikes in modern American history. There thousands and thousands of workers were on strike, and we didn't even hear about it because there's such control over the narrative about prisons and prisoners that's run by the carceral system. And so, by telling this story about someone who goes into prison already a millionaire, mm-hmm. and who has a friend on the outside who's kind of a hustler and, a pal, and who is someone who knows how to finagle the system, I can spin out a yarn that takes you like back to Patrick Nielsen Hayden and the big gear driving the little gear, takes you on a 360-degree tour of how fucked up the system is, rather than just the ant's eye view or the worm's eye view that most people get because they aren't even able to explore all the avenues and run into their dead ends because they're just stuck where they are.
Yeah. Corey, this has been wonderful. I want to again let people know your book, The Bezel, is in stores now. You can purchase it wherever fine books are sold. Do you have a preferred URL for buying it?
The-bezel.org is fine, but wherever people want to get it.
Yeah.
It's a national bestseller for the third week running. It's very good.
That's great.
Whoever feeds into the USA Today bestseller list.
You, apparently. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Cory Doctorow, do you have anything else you wanted to get to before we roll out today?
Well, I guess, if you want to follow the work that I do, pluralistic.net is a newsletter that I write every day, or almost every day. And it's open access. So that means it's Creative Commons licensed. You can reproduce it. You can reproduce it and sell it if you want. And there's no DRM. There's no tracking. There's no ads, there's no anything. It's black type on a white background. You'll never get a pop-up asking you whether you want to subscribe to my mailing list or whatever.
Yeah.
And the email version of it, you can get it as an email list. The email version, also no tracking. I can't tell when you've opened the email or anything. I keep no statistics, and it's a letter in a bottle I write and throw into the ocean every morning. And it's great. It's so much fun to write.
It's a great letter in a bottle. You've been writing a lot about AI lately, and kind of the how that all feeds into a lot of this stuff you've been covering about, the stuff you write about often about, bezels and scam economies. And I've really enjoyed getting your take on that, because I think you're one of the people who hasn't lost their minds over all this stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we're really we hear so much about AI disinformation, and the people who have most fallen prey to AI disinformation are bosses who've been convinced that AI is good enough to fire you and replace you with. And it's not true. It doesn't mean they won't do it, right? But it's not true. That's actually kind of the worst of all worlds, right? Yeah. Technological unemployment without actual replacement. It's just another bezel. It's that long moment where you think you've zeroed out your labor force costs, but you haven't realized that you're no longer productive because the chatbot keeps, as in the case of Air Canada, just telling people they can get refunds they're not entitled to. And then, regulators come along and smack you around and charge you, fine you for your chatbot having lied to people about their bereavement flight discounts and stuff.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that moment hitting, I guess, because I do kind of think we are sort of nearer to the bursting than we are to the peak of the bubble right now. But I guess we'll see.
Well, remember, the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. Yeah. So I've been predicting the collapse of the London housing bubble, for example, for a very long time. We're nowhere near it. Yeah. So that is my humbling lesson. It is definitely a bubble. It is going to burst. When it's going to burst, and is very, very, very hard to predict.
Yeah. What will burst with it? Yeah. Jeez. Well, Corey, thank you so much for being on the show. Again, everybody, check out The Bezel. Wonderful book. And check out Corey's other wonderful books, like Walk Away. That's the episode. Have a good one.
Thanks, Robert.
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Hey, this is U.S. Olympic gold medalist Tara Davis Woodhull.
And I'm U.S. Paralympic gold medalist Hunter Woodhull.
As athletes, our lives are about having a clear path.
And a team that you can absolutely trust.
So when it came to getting the best mortgage,
we chose PennyMac.
PennyMac is proud to be the official mortgage provider of Team USA and you.
Learn more at pennymac.com. PennyMac Loan Services, LLC, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID 35953. Licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Conditions and restrictions may apply.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today we have a very interesting interview. We're very lucky to be joined by Ong Kyo Mo, who we've heard from before, who is a minister who is Rohingya in the National Unity Government of Burma or Myanmar. Both of those words are okay. And we're talking about the situation of Rohingya people and the developments that have happened in Rakhine State since the beginning of Operation 1027. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, James. Thanks for having me. And it's good to be back with you to this show.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's wonderful to have you back, and we're very fortunate. So I wonder if we could start by summarizing for listeners the things that have happened in the last few months in Rakhine State, because there have been some massive changes since maybe listeners were last aware of what was happening there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Since the coup, there were on and off fights between the Arakan army and the military junta forces in Rakhine State. However, in the interest of the humanitarian need, both parties came to enter to a ceasefire agreement in between. However, the fight against the military junta in Myanmar started in different part of Myanmar, continues to be accelerating, and most recently the 1027 and followed by others operations in Kyrenia State has been quite rapidly spreading across the country, and that's definitely went to Rakhine State, where Arakan Army resumed to target the junta in its political objective to be reaching. That's the situations we are today. That the Arakan Army has been in very good positions to be dismantling the junta's forces in Rakhine State, and so far since Operation 1027 started, more than half of the township districts in Rakhine State has been seized by the Arakan Army, including some of those where majority of Rohingya lives, and it's continued to be in a very deteriorating situations.
Yeah, and they've even sunk junta ships or captured them in some cases. I think it's been a bit of a there was a video that was quite, like, maybe not viral is the wrong word. Certainly, I saw a lot, but of border guard forces, right, which are like militias allied to the junta, like fleeing into Bangladesh.
The border guard forces are mostly from militaries. They are trained militaries. Their uniforms are changed into border guard force due to different agreement with that exists between two states in allocating its troops along the border side, and the border guard forces are one of the most primary forces that's deported Rohingya and burned the Rohingyas' houses in 2027 and make them flee. So 6 years later, the same BGPs who committed the crimes against the Rohingya atrocities, that include crimes against humanity and war crimes, had to flee to Bangladesh in a quite similar way. To refuge, and so it's sort of karma or whatever you put it, anyway. And the perceptions and reality, of course, when it's kind of confrontations between the two groups, Arakan Army and the military junta forces. The reality that has been defined by most of us in Myanmar and across, that we used to believe that the Burmese military is a strong. Both by human resource and equipment, and in reality they are very weak, and Arakan Army has proved by dismantling various infantry battalion, and even capturing alive like second highest commanding officer in the whole of Rakhine State, and also many senior level officer has been killed over this battle. So the reality and perception has been deeper on Myanmar military when we look it from external perspective.
Yeah. And I think, just in case listeners aren't familiar, it can be very confusing if you don't read about this stuff all the time. It's sort of an alphabet soup of organizations, and especially with reference to Rohingya and Rakhine State, because we have Rohingya armed groups, or armed groups which draw mostly from Rohingya people that don't necessarily represent them all. And then we have the AA. So can you explain the AA's relationship to Rakhine State and then how they relate to Rohingya people?
The AA has been established in 2009 with aim to be having confederations and not less than war, which is another special regions in Myanmar with a special autonomy, and it has been led by some young people, and it has been quite a leadership as well within the Rakhine political spectrum, and AA has been growing very rapidly, and the acceptance of the people, particularly Rakhine people, has been very high. Therefore, the resource allocations that AA got from human resource to other resource to be rapidly coping with that growth has been high, and that put them in a position to be standing in front of a junta in a very stronger positions and defeat them in very rapidly. And of course, the Arakan army, which we refer here as AA, is not as inclusive as Rakhine. Rakhine State is very diverse, and it has got a multiple ethnic group. The largest ethnic group is Rakhine, religiously Buddhist people, and to which a majority of Arakan army's leadership derived from there. And there is second largest majority, which are the Rohingya, and Rohingya are still the second largest majority in the Rakhine State, despite a million being pushed out to Bangladesh in 2017, and several 100,000 are spread across the region. And the inclusivity in an Arakan army is still not there. When we talk about Rohingya, this means that there might be some small number of Rohingyas in different battalions of Arakan army and the administrative units that they are building at a very grassroots level. However, the Rohingya need to be included both by functions and in order to have to describe that relationship in an inclusive way between the Rohingya people and the Arakan army.
Yeah, and it's that Arakan. Is that, am I right? Arakan's the name of the area before it was called Rakhine State. Is that right?
Correct. It's before Burma became Burma. Arakan was a kingdom, and it used to have its own palace and its diversity, its heritage, and its natural resources. And then, of course, the Burmese colonizations happened within Burma, and later on, Rakhine has been named as Rakhine State.
Yeah, so it describes a geographical rather than ethnic identity, right, which is distinct from some of the other revolutionary organizations like Karen, Karenni, Kachin, or what have you.
I think there are similarities, and as well as there are differences when you put them together. And from a diversity perspective, Rakhine State is very diverse compared to other ethnic groups, and also it's politically very complex. So but there are overall similarities as well. Like all are fighting to defeat the junta to end the dictatorship in Myanmar. But the primary thing here is the self-determination and self-autonomy. Like, people want to decide to determine what is their present and future look like, how they want to treat with their past. That's the aspect. But of course, to the best of my knowledge, these ethnic resistance organizations, both political and the armed groups, have never claimed that they want to separate from Myanmar. It's coming together in a different way. The holding together would be in a different way.
Yeah, and even when I speak to Burma people who are like the majority ethnicity and the ethnicity from which the junta's leadership are drawn, like, they tell me they're committed to a federal and like a federal Myanmar with autonomy for these different regions and groups, and that's something that has held that coalition together, right?
Yeah, approximately more than 50 million populations in Myanmar. Majority are Burmese Buddhist, and they have been having this Buddhist supremacy and like Burma supremacy over ethnic and religious minorities across the country, and of course Kachin, Karen, and others, and went to determine when their future by themselves and have like equal say both by functions and number, and that's where we're having the 70 years long the civil war that's came to an collective revolutions in 2021, and historically speaking, people have been fighting in Myanmar for equality, justice, and to end the cycle of impunity for the last 70 plus years.
Great. I think that's a great place to take our first advertising break. All right, and we're back. I think you did an excellent job of explaining the history that got us here. And people will be very familiar with the atrocities committed by the Burmese military and its proxies against the Rohingya people, I hope. But one thing that's been happening recently, which is particularly appalling, is the forced recruitment of Rohingya people by that same military, right? Can you explain what's been going on?
So the conscriptions law has been reactivated. It has been there, launched by the previous military dictators, but it has not been active. And so since the junta has been falling apart and collapsing, not only in Rakhine State, across the country, wherever they fight, they lose. And they are battalions by battalion that's running away to Thailand, running away to India, running away to Bangladesh, and putting white flag. And there are several casualties. And apparently, the junta became the largest military equipment supplier to the revolutionary force, where we did not get international support when young people, actress, models, and writers, poets decided to go to the forest to fight against this junta, and there was little to no international support, and we have been struggling to equip ourselves to fight this junta, and of course the resilience and the courage that young people had, and the tactical and strategic capacity that the ethnic resistance organization had in combined became a factor to have a strategic sourcing of the military equipment, and where junta, like battalion by battalion, you don't need to buy the weapons and military tank and things like that. You go and fight one battalion and they run away or they die, and then you take over that's how the whole thing started. Then when they are losing, they reactivated this conscriptions law, and started to, in the interest of making mandatory everyone to be serving by force in the military by turns. And of course, when it's come to Rakhine State, there is 600,000 Rohingya, and 150 to 60,000 of them has been in concentration camp, consolidated in one place with movement restrictions, no access to education, healthcare, and things like that, where they have been living more than a decade in some of those camps. And villages where those people who are not in the camp as well has been imposed by additional movement restrictions. So you don't need to really go and mobilize and people to be forcefully recruiting. And at the beginning, the junta went to them and to give them sort of show them incentive of, like, you will become the citizens, and we'll give that and we'll give that, and you need to fight against the Arkan army. And of course, the grassroots, the leader, community leader, responded in a way that they need to respond to reject the request from the military junta, and then military junta started to, of course, impose by using the force. And as I mentioned earlier, they will need to like when you have consolidated people, that amount of young people doing nothing, and you just go and catch them and put them on a truck. And some of them don't know where they are going because their whole life has been in this camp. Like when you're 6-year-old and you're now 18 and it's mandatory for you to be serving in the military, and you don't know what is happening in outside of your camp because you have been, so that's how really and then we got these news, and of course we have been talking different community leaders, and the community has been approaching to us as a government, and we make there are several media coverage as well. Then the military started to say these Bengalis are not referring to the Rohingya, are not the citizens of Myanmar, therefore. There is no way that we make them serve in the military. So those are fake news. So they use this state propaganda TV channel and the state newspaper, which is now under control of SAC, to deny that. And on 7th March, those who they have conscripted. More than 500 has been brought into the commanding office of the junta to be training in full uniform. Some of them, those inside there, has managed to get internet access, and then sent to me the video footage what is happening inside there. Jeez. So I posted that on my Twitter and then it's spread from there, and then we caught them like their denial initially, the lies that they have been putting by denying that Rohingya were not conscripted. Oh, what's wrong? And then a few days later, they have been sent to the front line to fight against AA, and then there are hundreds of those Rohingyas who died in this front line while. And the junta came back a few days later. Talking to their families, saying that 100 plus people has died, and we don't know who is who. And when we bring you dead body, you will be able to be identified. And the first dead body that they brought and handed over to the family and the community leader with 1 million jets, which is $350 plus 100 kg of rice as an incentive for the life that they have given in fighting. So that's the situations, and we can of course continue.
Yeah, that's very bleak, isn't it? And so this, and we've seen like just today, actually, people have been online today. There was a protest in Rakhine State somewhere of Rohingya people rejecting the Arakan army. Can you explain like that might not be what it seems on the face of it, right? Can you explain what might be happening there?
So the situations in Rakhine State has been very much complex because there are hidden factors being created, artificially created by the junta for so long, from 2000 and 2012, 2017. Between these different communities, there has been always interdependency and social cohesion to somewhat level. But junta always used the divide and rule methodology to bring the conflict between this community and hate each other, and then they can carry out what they need to do as a power holder. And of course, when the Arakan army is getting greater control over Rakhine State and the junta is losing, the military junta need to use all tactics that they have, including the intercommunal tensions, and so there are few Rohingya maybe who has businesses with this junta are being used as a proxy to push pressure on the Rohingya and to organize, and so that's why the protest started a few days ago in one of the townships in Rakhine State where 80 to 90% are Rohingya, and claiming that we don't want war and we don't want AA. And of course, this can be happening artificially, organically, and it's so artificial. And anyone who looks into this video footage can say that the Rohingya never had in their life, like those who are protesting, never know what it means, freedom of expression means. And suddenly, in one random morning, 100 of Rohingya, including minors, children, coming on the street and protesting is not something normal. It can happen without the And of course, majority of the Rohingya are peace-loving people, and they want Burma to be an inclusive federal democracy, and they want to be part of it. And that's why I myself, as a Rohingya, taking a leading role in the government as the first Rohingya holding back ministerial positions in the cabinet since 1962, and of course the Rohingya equally want to end the dictatorship once and for all, because that very junta has been committing atrocities, crimes, including crimes against humanity and to genocide to Rohingya. This is the very same military who deported 1 million Rohingya, killed more than 24,000 of people in burning children alive in 2017. So in which way that Rohingya collectively will come and stand with this junta, with the whole country? So this is really not something organic, and this is artificial. This is so fake, and this is so like junta made into be fitting into their political propaganda.
Yeah, and I think one has to, when one's looking at things in Myanmar, be aware that the junta just doesn't care about lying. It's something they've done for a long time. Apparently, you can't download iHeart podcasts in Myanmar now. Someone tried to download our podcast there, and so they had to use a VPN. But yeah, they manipulate the media environment heavily. Like, you can read junta newspapers, and some of it's comically false. But one thing I did want to talk about is, like, when I talk to young PDF fighters, and I've spoken to dozens of them now, people who are Karenni, people who are Karen, people who are Bamar, people who are Kachin, a lot of them say to me that, like, what happened in 2017 was atrocious. And at the time, they didn't realize, because of this manipulated media environment, they didn't realize that the way the Rohingya were being treated was so appalling. And that now they're very upset about what happened. And, like, for them, I guess the litmus test for a future for Burma is one that can include Rohingya people. And so, like, with that in mind, I guess we've seen this kind of changing of language, right? Where previously they were referred to as Bangladeshi, and then now they're referred to as Muslim or Rohingya people. I guess, can you just explain, like, what is the NUG PDF kind of, like, how do we ensure independence and safety for Rohingya people in Myanmar in a federal democratic future without a dictatorship?
We're in a context of identity politics, where the identity is so much associated with very rights, whether it's political, social, and economical rights that you deserve, and what you need to give back as an active citizens and obligations to the country that you belong. Therefore, the identity of the Rohingya is a primary thing for Rohingya to be enjoying equal freedom and to be able to contribute equally as others in the nation building process. And of course, before 2017, even before that, there has been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, widespread, state-sponsored against the Rohingya to that could be misleading and incitement of violence, and the term Bengali is a term that refers that you are coming from Bangladesh illegally and you are illegally resettling. That's how the terms came derived from.
And it's false, right? It's a false accusation.
It's false accusations, and the Rohingya people has existed in Rakhine State side by side with Rakhine people. Even Burma became Burma, and there are historical facts, and there are so many undeniable things that you could look into and into various historical facts, and so the in between, of course, the Rohingya, the term became illegal, and the military denied it, rejected it, and then they started to use the term Bengali, and the most of the Burmese people fall into that trap, and even some were either silent in this horrific genocidal attack in 2017, or some were taking side of a military at that time, that it's okay to kill and it's okay to, and of course these are being propelled by all misinformations and disinformations that I earlier mentioned, and 2021 attempted coup happened, and that's where a new perspective is being offered to the people of Myanmar, because the same military that has been carrying out atrocities, crimes against the Rohingya and other minorities came to larger Burma people doing the same thing. So what has been told to us by the Rohingya and the religious and ethnic minority in Myanmar for the decade came to be true. And that's how the acceptance of the Rohingya has started to grow. Of course, it's not to the level that we'd be satisfied with yet. It's a process, and there is so much to unlearn, because one provoking factor like attempted coup wouldn't fix a problem that has been there for decades. And National Unity Government declare that we accept the term Rohingya, and there has been a policy stating very clearly in 2021 June, and that policy to be implemented, of course, when the situation is conducive and there are significant challenges with the territorial control and things like that when it's come. But again, the momentum that I mentioned we got as a result of Spring Revolutions need to be maintained at the higher scale. That's not only the Rohingya, and anything that's wrong, that's primarily that's principle and value-wise wrong. We need to be able to say it's wrong, regardless of whoever it is and regardless of race and religion. If we are talking about federal inclusive democracy, we cannot preach to our people or international community saying that support us or asking for support or be a part of this movement where we see as a preferred future as an inclusive federal democracy, where actual values that we are not practicing by ourselves. So before we preach, we need to act upon those principles by ourselves. And overall, I would say all the loss that we had, including life and livelihood, that hundred of people, thousands of people has been killed, jailed, and hundreds of villages, township has been destroyed. The good thing that we got is this consciousness on the morality, and if we're able to accelerate that consciousness at the greater scale, that's where we will be able to maintain the values and principle of the inclusive federal democracy. That will be the pillar to maintain this as a process.
Yeah, I think so. It's really fascinating to talk to young people. I was talking to some Mandalay PDF people not so long ago, and they were like, oh yeah, well, when we left, we were told that like the Ta'ang would hate us because we're Burmese and that they would fight us. And then they're like, oh, they're really nice. Like, this is a Ta'ang guy right next to me. And they're like, because they're joined up together now, the PDFs and the EROs are largely fighting like side by side against the junta. Is there like, are there PDF forces present in Rakhine State as well?
No, there is Arakan Army, particularly, which is an alliance with the. We have been. There have been multiple there are. We have alliance relations committee that would deal with all the alliance as National Unity Government, and of course, they have been playing an important role in defeating the junta, and there is no PDF in Rakhine State.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a little different there. Although often the PDF and the EROs are very similar in fight side by side.
Also, Arakan Army is not alone in Rakhine State. They are almost also in Shan State, and they are fighting with not only in Rakhine State. So, like when we talk about even though the physically PDFs are not there, it doesn't mean that there is no military connections between the ethnic organizations that exist across the country.
Yeah, and like we've seen that a lot since October, right? Like since the Three Brother Alliance started their campaign, that moves junta forces to one place, and that allows other people like the Karenni to take advantage of the way those forces have moved, and they've liberated huge parts of their territory. So like it's all joined, I guess.
Yeah, the tricky part that they have used in the past is like hidden cut, is that they will do ceasefire in one part of the country and they will allocate all of their resources in another part of the country, and where they will defeat or they will at least like come to a bargaining positions. Let's not fight anymore, and you stay where you are and don't try to it's junta who violate again all these agreements that they initially sell, and this time it's so coordinated across the country that the junta cannot be able to position themselves or strategize themselves or put themselves in a tactical positions. Their old tactic did not work in the modern coordinations of the PDF and Ethnic Resistance Organization.
Yeah, no, they've tried multiple times to have little individual ceasefires, and it hasn't worked. So I wanted to ask, just to finish up, people, I think, who listen to this will be very familiar with the situation in Myanmar, and they want to help, and they see that the international community is doing nothing. And I think a lot of people are rightly very upset about that. So what can people do to help, and especially to advocate for Rohingya people?
Particularly when it's come to the Rohingya people crisis is so much interconnected with Burmese democratization process. Rohingya will not be able to have a life that's dignified, safe, and in their place of origin, unless the Burma is solely in the hand of a civilian government. So the democratization process that whole Burma is attempting to make need to be supported by international community, as I mentioned earlier. So far, we got little to no international support. Yeah. And on the Rohingya crisis as well, there's 1 million people in Bangladesh where their rations are cut to $8 per month per person, and which is a cup of coffee in the United States.
Yeah,
and there is a greater danger of hunger, starvations, and malnutrition, and so many other social economic problems that would have an impact on the regional security, stability, and things like that if the shortfall remains. Funding shortfall remains for the Rohingya. That's on the humanitarian end, and of course, Rohingya need to be politically organized in order to be fitting into the changing political dynamic of Myanmar. And Rohingya has been oppressed. They were not able to form civil society organizations. They were not able to be educating themselves. So all these societal leadership aspects need to be supported, including having having an organized political platform for Rohingya, which will be able to represent Rohingya in the larger political table, ensuring their voices are heard and they're able to equally take the right that they deserve, and more importantly, equally able to contribute to decisions that will have an impact on their life. And United States has determined the crimes against Rohingya as genocide 2 years before, and of course the genocide determination does not simply is an announcement. It's come with the moral and legal responsibility. So we do want to request United States and its people to firmly stand on the moral and legal obligations that it has in ensuring that the Rohingya are able to live equally, peacefully, and more importantly, the justice that they deserve on the physical and mental damage that's happened as part of the genocide. And it was peaked in 2017. It's continued to be happening today, and even today, 150 people were arriving in Aceh, Indonesia, where the Indonesian people who were showing greater humanity in opening their arms and hearts to be accepting Rohingya are denying the Rohingya. So for the Rohingya, there is little to no space to be accommodated, both in regional and international and local setting. And it is very important that we are able to tackle and navigate these issues together with the international community in an innovative, effective, efficient, and sustainable way for the sake of humanity. And there are competing priorities across the world, but the international community is, we are so aware that international community is capable of doing more than one thing at a time. It doesn't have to be either or.
No, it can be both, and it should be, right? Like, obviously, people are very concerned with the plight of Palestinian people, rightly so, at the moment. But yes, we should remember that other Muslim people have been subject to genocide, for the last nearly 7 years, I suppose, and it's ongoing, and they deserve our support and solidarity as well. And I hope.
Yeah,
I mean, it does seem like, I guess, a little more hopeful than it was even a couple of years ago that there will be a democratic Myanmar and not so far away.
The journey is almost made, and what we need is greater international support. Support doesn't mean just releasing the statement. Meaningful, comprehensive support that we are able to defeat this junta once and for all, for the sake of people of Myanmar. 50+ million people giving the price at the highest possible price in their life. That's include again the lives and livelihood. And international community was not doing more than condemnations or releasing a statement of concern over the last 3 years. So it's time to act, and international community again has to answer this question to next generations when there is a questions on the morality where the international community, when the genocide comes against humanity and war crime has been happening to millions and millions of people in the eyes of international community.
Yeah, no, I hope they do, and it's incredible the progress that has been made without that support. And I think it's just incredible to me that even I remember in 2021 talking to people who were just beginning their fight, and to see how far they've come is outstanding. And people should be very proud of that. But it doesn't mean that they don't need more support. They do. It doesn't mean that they don't need surface-to-air missiles. They do. That is the thing that we should be doing. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your insight into this. Is there anywhere where people can find you online if they want to follow on?
Yeah, they can follow me on my Twitter and Facebook, and my Twitter is akmo2. Okay. And my Facebook is like my name. If you type my name Aung Kyaw Moe, it will appear. Looking forward to seeing you in the near future.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Hey, this is U.S. Olympic gold medalist Tara Davis-Woodhull.
And I'm U.S. Paralympic gold medalist Hunter Woodhull.
As athletes, our lives are about having a clear path.
And a team that you can absolutely trust.
So when it came to getting the best mortgage,
we chose PennyMac.
PennyMac is proud to be the official mortgage provider of Team USA and you.
Learn more at pennymac.com. PennyMac Loan Services, LLC, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID 35953. Licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Conditions and restrictions may apply.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here, a podcast being recorded through a haze of painkillers. I'm your host, Mia Wong. I'm fucking dying. With me is James.
Yeah, fentanyl episode. You've been waiting for it. Here it is.
Yeah, and the other thing that's dying, has died, sort of, was a bunch of French colonists in Algeria.
Yeah. The French Empire as a whole, one could say.
Yeah, thank God. Jesus Christ. Why did we let these people have an empire? Terrible idea. What's it? Not an empire. The abroad France, right? Like the little parts of France which just happen to be in Africa. Totally a normal thing. Which particular part of the French Empire are we talking about? There are many such cases of French Empire taking L's. Not that that's unique, to be fair. Also, British Empire took a lot of L's. Yeah. So today we're talking about Algeria, and I think one of the things that I've sort of realized about how the Algerian Revolution is remembered in the West is okay. So there's the kind of the Frank Herbert reaction where they saw people who were Muslim in the streets and were like, "Holy shit!" and went insane for 70 years.
Yeah.
To be fair, that was also partly being driven mad by the Portland dunes, which, like, you know, like I get. Sometimes you're driven completely insane by dunes, but you know, so there's a sort of reactionary memory of it. There's a sort of memory that functions inside of like the American military, where, you know, Algeria is remembered as one of the sort of like examples of failed counterinsurgency.
Yeah,
and then there's the memory inside of the American left, which is largely confined to Fanon and the movie The Battle of Algiers.
Yep, classic movie, to be fair.
Yeah, great movie. Like nothing. Good movie. However, this is a real issue because The Battle of Algiers, again, great movie, ends in 1957. Fanon, great theorist, dies in 1961. Now, notably, Algeria gains independence 1962. So, okay, the issue with this is that people kind of broadly know the outlines of the first Algerian Revolution. But the second Algerian Revolution, the one where the Algerian working class seizes the control of the means of production and attempts to run them autonomously, has completely faded into the mist of history. I talk about it, no one has any idea what the fuck I'm talking about. And this is kind of startling because, you know, up until there's probably like a 4-year span where the Algerian Revolution is the sort of like capital S, capital R social revolution. Like it's the big one. It's the one people all over the world are taking inspiration from. And then it kind of, you know, it flounders out for reasons that we're going to talk about. And also the Cultural Revolution starts and everyone latches onto that. But it's sort of fascinating to me that the second part of the revolution and the part that everyone was really excited about, which is the core of the revolution being workers' self-management, and that being the sort of great theoretical innovation of Algerian socialism, that has just completely faded from memory. It's just gone. And so today we're talking about that revolution. Unfortunately, one of the most detailed studies on this I'm going to be citing from a lot is Ian Clegg's Workers' Self-Management in Algeria. Now, this is a good book. However, Clegg is... he's a very specific kind of curmudgeon-y Marxist guy.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that kind of guy.
Yeah, and so like the back third of this book is him engaged in a protracted ideological war with Fanon over the nature of revolutionary consciousness, which is largely pointless and goes nowhere.
Yeah.
So
many such cases.
You know. But it is a very, very detailed and very useful account of what actually happened after the first revolution, like after the French are forced to pull out of Algeria. And what happens effectively is, well, okay, we need to go back a little tiny bit. So there are there is a staggering slaughter of people who attempt to resist French colonialism. Like a lot of the sort of techniques that are going to be used in Vietnam, that are going to be used all over the world in counterinsurgencies, are developed in Algeria in this period. I'm going to read a quote from Clegg about what they were doing. The use of air power and napalm to clear cover made movement inside the country almost impossible. The construction of mined and electrified barriers along the border with Tunisia and Morocco kept the better trained and armed elements of the Armée de Libération Nationale from coming to support the guerrillas and moving in supplies. One of the most successful moves in countering guerrilla activity was the policy of regroupment initiated by General Chalet. This strategy, learnt from the British in Malaysia, involved moving the rural population out of areas favorable to the guerrillas and resettling them in camps under military guard. An estimated 2 million peasants were treated this way, creating vast social and economic problems for the future. So, like, they put 2 million people in concentration camps.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, calling it like regroupement is a fucking exercise in in marketing. Like, rarely have I seen something so nefariously named. Like, we're regrouping them, parentheses, in a fucking concentration camp.
Yeah, and this is a strategy that, so the British sort of start doing this in Malaysia. A lot of it's derived from attempts to counter, and this isn't really an episode about that Algerian Revolution, but I want to talk about this a little bit. It's designed as a way to counter sort of Maoist insurgency campaigns, which is the sort of, the becomes the new template for
like the paradigm.
Insurgencies and it's because it works really well. And, like the key thing of Maoist, there's a couple of things obviously, but like one of the key elements of it is this line from Mao, is it like the gorilla moves through the people like a fish moves through the sea. Yeah. Right. So it's about building social bases such that, guerrillas can move in and out of communities and not get turned in and stuff and use them as terrain.
I've had that particular Mao phrase paraphrased to me, I think sometimes for people who are aware it comes from Mao, sometimes people who probably have just sort of come to it through their own understanding or heard it but not realized the source of it. By people who are certainly not Maoists all over the world. Like I've heard it in the Middle East, I've heard it in Africa, I've heard it in Asia. Like it is a very important thing, and like it does make guerrilla warfare a lot easier if you can rely on the population.
This is something that's propagated through because of the success of sort of Mao's like guerrilla insurgency. This is something that's propagated through communist parties, but I mean, like a lot of Islamist groups also pick up a lot of elements of it, because a lot of those groups are trained in the PLO's camps in the Bekaa Valley in Jordan, and so like a lot of groups like all over the world of completely unrelated ideologies all sort of pick this stuff up. And the British response to this is the British are fighting a communist insurgency in Malaysia, and they're like, okay, we're going to do concentration camps. For our purposes, so obviously this is this is an unfathomable atrocity, but it has enormous effects even after the war ends, because suddenly, like the war ends, the French are gone, but 2 million people have been taken from their homes and locked in camps, and this has enormous, this has enormous economic effects. And the second thing that has really sort of stunning economic effects are there'd been a class of people in Algeria called the colons, who are basically they're the colonists. They're not actually all French. A lot of them are from other European countries, but they come to be this sort of hardcore French ultra nationalist, sort of fascist turbo racists. I guess they're not quite the Rhodesians, but they're only not quite the Rhodesians because they didn't stay to fight it out. And when the French lose the war, when the French pull out, these people just flee. Like all of them. We're talking like hundreds of thousands of people just are gone. I'm going to read another quote from Clegg because, if these people had merely left, I think a lot of what's going to happen in this revolution goes a lot better. But they didn't just leave. Quote, in June, a policy of scorched earth was declared, inaugurating an orgy of destruction. With his dream crumbling, the colonist response was to destroy this world. Which I think is a really sort of elegant.
Yeah. I think that's actually very well written. And it's funny. It's this thing that, again, like, you see replicated so often. There was this slogan that they used at the start of the Syrian civil war, like Assad or we burn the country.
Yeah, and it's this real, so what the colonists end up doing is they end up just destroying everything they can get their hands on. They're destroying houses. They're especially destroying any kind of sort of factory or technical equipment. Anything they can find, they're burning, they're lighting on fire. And the other thing about, so Algeria is a colonial economy, right? And the structure of the colonial economy is such that, if you are anyone who has any kind of technical or managerial experience are all colonists, right? Everyone else in the country is either doing subsistence farming or has been fed in as like this sort of like seasonal workers or really, really badly paid sort of contract workers on these sort of like cash crop agricultural farms, a lot of orange production, stuff like that. And so when the colonists flee the country, suddenly, like, the entire technical managerial class, everyone with technical experience, and also all of the bosses and the entire bourgeoisie are just gone. And this takes everyone by surprise. The FLN had assumed, the FLN's the kind of like umbrella organization that carried out the revolution. It kind of falls apart very quickly because it's not really a coherent ideological group. It's just a sort of banner that everyone who is fighting kind of attaches themselves to.
Yeah, this is quite common, right? Like national fronts or like popular fronts very often do this post-revolution.
Yeah, and they should disintegrate. But they had all expected that the colonists were going to stick around, and they don't because they're turbo racists, right? And the thought of having to live in an Algeria ruled by Algeria, this was like, nope, I will fucking literally light the world on fire and flee to France. You know what else is going to light the world on fire and cause people to flee to France?
Is it the products and services that support the show?
Yeah, so how fucking good they are, it's gonna cause the world to burn and make people flee to France.
Yeah, I have to think about that when I think about like how big my pile of gold is. I think that it's too small. I'd better just burn it all down and move to France.
And we are back. Now, enter here, the heroes of this episode. The Workers' Council, or very specifically, so this is a French colony. So in France and in Spain and in sort of, I guess, the Romance languages, there was a concept called autogestion. I'm pronouncing it really badly because I'm reading the French version of it and trying to pronounce it half in Spanish, the only one of these languages I can even sort of speak. But it means self-management, and it has this context of sort of like workers' democratic self-management, right? If you're doing autogestion, you're like the workers of a factory have taken over the factory and are now running it themselves. The most prominent example, and at this point of self-management, is Yugoslavia. Now, the Yugoslavian version is very, very weird, but as a way basically to tell the Soviets to fuck off, Yugoslavia adopts a very different kind of model of socialism than everyone else's. So their model's based on the quote unquote, the withering away of the state. So you have basically these like reasonably democratic like workers co-ops that are sort of their productive basis of society, and these co-ops sort of compete against each other on the market. But on the other hand, there is a very large level of workers' control that's different from, like the US, which is just a pure dictatorship of your boss in the workplace tells you what to do, and if you don't do it, you get fired.
Yeah.
And so Algeria has their own version of self-management. But unlike Algeria, which was sort of effectively imposed by the top down from the Communist Party, in Algeria, what happens is you have this enormous mass of workers who used to work on these plantations, used to work in factories. There's these huge colonial agricultural estates. And what happens is with the entire ruling class gone, and when I say the entire ruling class, we're talking from all the way up from, the highest level government officials through all of your sort of capitalist bosses, right down to sort of the middle management guys are gone.
Yeah.
All those people just have disappeared. So what happens is workers start taking over all of their workplaces, and they start forming workers' councils.
Right.
Now, this is driven largely by. I mean, there's a few different drivers. We'll get to the ideological aspect. A lot of it is that these people have no money, and no one else is going to run it. So the workers who have now seized all of this stuff are like, okay, well, we're gonna get the money we need to survive by running all this stuff ourselves.
Yeah.
And so this sort of starts in 1962, and it sweeps across the country very quickly. I mean, there's a lot of rural regions where it never really takes hold, but largely what's happening is that permanent workers who had been workers at these firms seize control of them. This has benefits and downsides. The benefit of it is, so there's an attempt by the sort of the new Algerian sort of bourgeoisie, the sort of like small faction of Algerian capitalists to buy up all this land. And there's a bunch of really funny stories of these guys buying these estates and showing up and the workers' committee just kicking them out.
Yeah. Yes, I've seen some of these.
Just extremely funny.
Yeah.
There's also issues. So part of what's going on is this is the permanent workers taking over the stuff with their people, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times, like they'll kick out seasonal workers, because so it's not perfect, and there's a lot of issues with it, right? Because this is all being formed effectively spontaneously by a bunch of extremely desperate people.
That's what I was just obviously, like, because it's me, the point of comparison I'm thinking of is the Spanish Civil War, right?
Yeah.
And workers' self-management. But there you have a workforce which has been working towards collectivization for more than a decade in some cases. And also, like, this is a point actually that gets missed a lot in online discourse about the Spanish Civil War, perhaps because people don't know as much as they think they do. That, like, there were anarchists in all kinds of roles, like when people talk about the Ruti column or whatever. Like, there were absolutely anarchist non-commissioned officers from the military who they relied on heavily for advice. And the same is true with the collectivized workplaces, right? That there were anarchists in many roles, in shop stewards and things like that. Obviously not in, like, the higher management roles. I think doing that is kind of incompatible with anarchism, and obviously what we're dealing here with is anarcho-syndicalism for the most part, whereas the FIRE was more of a purist anarchist group. But there you had people who had been working towards this for a long time, who had been planning for it, and who did have people with a variety of experiences in, I think oversight might be a better word than management, perhaps, or like sort of organization. But they were very successful but that didn't just happen overnight. It often gets presented as if it did, as if on like the 18th of July, these people were just sort of going to work, and by the 20th, they were fully formed anarchists running their own workplaces. But that's absolutely not the case.
Yeah, and Algeria is the exact opposite of this, which is there's a very low level of political consciousness. There's organization is almost non-existent because. So, I mean, the kinds of organizations that had existed are, you have these sort of vanguard cells, but those are largely rural. And then you have there are some unions, but they're not very large because they've been outlawed.
There's repression, right?
On the ground. Yeah, like unbelievable repression.
Colonial context is extremely important.
Yeah,
obviously neither me or I is blaming Algerian workers for not being Catalan.
No, yeah, like this is the French's fault, and but this
many such cases.
But this seizure really takes everyone by surprise because all of the sort of leaders of the FLN, all leaders of the various factions had assumed that either they were going to sort of do. I don't know. There's ideological conflict, but they all assume that they're going to do some kind of like giant state-led industrialization project, right? Whether it's a socialist one, whether it's a more Islamist one, and then suddenly they are now all it's like, okay, well your economy is now on the Yugoslavian self-management model because all of these workers have just seized all their workplaces.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few organizations that are politically very supportive of this. The UGTA, which is Algeria's big sort of trade union, are very politically socialist, and they are really the only people in this entire country who are an organized political body who actually want to see this thing work. And so they do a lot of work helping workers set up their committees and spreading the revolution. Their plan is to use this against any attempt to set up basically a dictatorship by and it's okay. And this is where it gets sort of interesting, because very explicitly they are trying to stave off sort of Soviet style socialist dictatorship, right? They are, and their plan is we're going to use the workers' councils as the basis of an actual sort of workers' democracy against the sort of orthodox, like, Marxist-Leninist stuff. And this is another thing that's going on too, is the army is a lot more orthodox Marxist-Leninist than either the workers' committees or the unions. And so in a lot of parts of the countries in the West, the army just sort of rolls through, knocks off the workers' committees, and seizes the land for itself. And that's a fiasco. But now, very quickly, Ben Bella, who emerges as the leader of Algeria after a set of political maneuvering that we're not going to get into here, is basically forced to, in 1963, set a bunch of decrees saying that, these guys are the people who run the economy, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to actually get into something that is really not talked about in 99% of the accounts of this stuff, which is, how do these councils actually work? Because, spoiler alert, this whole thing is going to fail and all these people are going to be crushed. And a lot of that has to do with how this thing's set up, which is very badly, because this is a system designed by Marxists, and they're very sympathetic Marxists to a broad extent, but unfortunately, the way that this is set up is that, okay, so there's an assembly, right? That's like all the workers in the firm are in this assembly. The assembly elects this workers' council, which has like 10 people, and then that council elects the management committee, which is the people who actually do the management. So it has a president, and there's also a director who's supposed to represent the interests of the state or whatever. And the issue with this is that it's designed specifically to keep power out of the hands of workers directly, right? That giant assembly, it can't actually make policy. The only thing it can do is approve plans or disapprove plans set down by the management committee.
Got it. Okay. And these people at the management committee are presumably like representatives as opposed to delegates, right?
Yeah, they're representatives. They also have 3-year terms.
And they can't be recalled.
I think they can, but it's really hard.
Okay.
And the other thing that sort of destroys this is that there's a lot of sort of like election rigging by the state, who doesn't want these things to be actual sort of democratic. And this leads into the bigger issue, which is state control. And this is where I think really, and this is something that Clegg doesn't get into much, because Clegg is a Marxist. But this is where the Marxism of it all really comes into play. But first, do you know who's not a Marxist?
Oh, yes, almost certainly.
Yeah, not Marxists. I think we can say not Marxists. All right, we are back. So the biggest issue here, and this is something that was kind of true in both Algeria and in the other kind of big Marxist self-management experiments in Chile, which is that the self-managing firms don't have control over a lot of the things that they need, right? So in Algeria, when the state essentially tries to absorb all of this stuff, when it gets sort of legitimized under these decrees, there are a lot of issues. One is that these self-managing organizations don't have control over their own money. So you're getting paid by the state, right? And you give the state your money, and then they pay you. And this becomes a real issue, because the state goes, oh, well, the people in these self-managing things are actually like privileged workers, so they have permanent pay freezes, and also you can't reinvest your profits back into the firm, which is a real issue.
This is like a horrible combination of like ANCAP and like straight up like Stalinist, like it without. Yeah, I don't want to like derail us too much, but this again like is a distinct.
It's so much worse than the Spanish system. It's so much worse.
Yes.
Like every part of it is set up to fail.
Yeah, and I think this shit always this is the sort of discourse. I am now going to derail us. I'm sorry. This is the kind of like the online hammer and sickle in bio discourse that we see so often, right? And you don't have to pay attention to those people, and like you probably shouldn't, but just to like put it out there, I think like anarcho-syndicalism is right there, and it allows for the like unions and syndicates which overlook a whole industry to coordinate between workers' committees and ensure that like things get done and people get treated with dignity, and they also make enough money or have access to the resources that they need to survive. And when we try and like cut the corners off this, or kind of make a little collage between this and Marxist-Leninism or state socialism, like neither thing works, and we just end up with this kind of terrible hodgepodge in which it doesn't function, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that worker self-management itself is invalid as a concept. And
there's a lot of things here that, you know, so one of the big criticisms of this at the time by socialist intellectuals is people going, well, there's not coordination. The firms are competing against each other. There's not broad economic coordination. It's like, well, yeah, that's because the state controls all their finances. They don't have the ability to do coordination with each other. And the big thing, and this is the thing that really actually kills this, is that. So Clegg calls it marketing is controlled by the state, but that's not quite what's going on. The other thing that's controlled by the state is the state has the responsibility and is the people who are in charge of selling the products. And they just fuck this up completely. They can't figure out how to get like the fruit that's being produced sold, right? The problem here isn't output. It's that the state is doing things like, I mean, sometimes they'll have all these oranges. So a lot of the Algerian agricultural economy is set up as a cash crop economy. And you're supposed to fight you. So, okay. And it's never really worked very well. But the Algerian state just completely shits the bed. And we're talking like tons of fruit is just sitting there rotting. A lot of the time what they do is they just dump it onto the French market for like basically zero cost. And so you get these things and you look at the sort of profit loss thing, and you know, the sort of like right-wing parts of the state and the sort of, I guess they are right wing, but the sort of anti self-management parts of the state are going, oh, well, look at these firms, they're hemorrhaging all this money. And it's like, well, yeah, they're hemorrhaging money because instead of actually selling the goods, you guys are throwing all of their goods into a dumpster. Like, yeah, of course it's not working, right?
Yeah, and this is a struggle of like post-colonial economies. Like if you in the French colonial system, like they've decided that Algeria is going to be the place that makes oranges for the entirety of the French, I'm just sort of manufacturing example, empire here, then evidently once you secede from that empire, you now have a fuck ton more oranges than you need for Algeria. So you're now going to have to navigate, and you might not have enough.
Well, and they can't even figure out how to sell it to other Algerians too. That's the problem with the sort of state control of the market, is they can't do either because the bureaucrats that are running this are completely incompetent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one could argue the state's incapable of allocating resources equally or fairly, but yes, even so, they've done a bad job even by state standards.
Yeah, and the subsequent issue too is because all of the finances are controlled by the state. Even the firms that are profitable, and there are firms that are very profitable, they can't reinvest their profit back into, you know, improving efficiency or doing the basic things that workers need, which is having money to eat, because that money is just, that all of that sort of capital is just being eaten by the state. And so, you know, I'm going to quote Clegg again. As the president of a self-managed farm said to me in 1965, in this situation, how can we persuade the worker that he is no longer working for a capitalist exploiter? And like, well, yeah, he objectively is, right? He is like, the state is stealing all of his money and then doing some stupid bullshit with it.
Yeah, I love that they're not quite joining the dots there. Like, these guys don't seem to be getting it. Like, maybe they do get it.
And this is one of these things where, you know, I keep going. Clegg doesn't really draw this line because Clegg just refuses to talk about either Hungary or the Spanish Revolution at all, right?
And this is where he's ML, you really don't like to.
Well, he's not an ML. Like, that's the thing. He is a pro worker self management guy, right? Mm-hmm. But he's a Marxist pro worker self management guy.
Right. Yeah.
And so he's attributing the failure of this largely to like, well, there wasn't sufficient consciousness. So it's like, well, no, like this system even if everyone wanted it to work, this system couldn't have worked because it was set up in such a way that it was, and this is something, this is part of what I want to talk to you about. This was that if you look at the way that the Spanish system is set up, right? It's built off of coordination, like basically like sectoral coordination between everyone who's doing a thing, right? It's built on resource sharing. If I'm remembering my stuff right, I mean, they have a banking union, and people put their profits into the banking union, and then people can get money from the banking union to reinvest it in other places.
Yeah, I think that's correct. It's also like, like this. I guess would that be called vertical integration if it's the whole sector, even if it's
they do this thing which takes advantage of both of the advantages that self-management gives you, which is one, like, and like sort of, and it's like socialist self-management, right? You have the advantage of scale, which is that you're now instead of competing against each other, you're now coordinating an entire sector, right? And you're producing stuff for need. And then on the other hand, you have the other thing that's supposed to be the advantage of self-management, which is that the workers themselves, who are the people who are supposed to understand the production process the best, can make decisions over how they're going to do things. But then if you look at the Algerian system, because it's set up by Marxists, it's specifically designed such that basically you're instead of you actually managing yourself, you're just electing your boss, and then your boss manages you.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not actually a good, and it's weird because looking at this, right, this is actually a worse system in terms of self-management, I think, in a lot of senses than the Chinese one. Because the Chinese system is not designed for self-management, but you can't fire people. So, because you can't fire people, you have to listen to what people think and what people sort of do. Whereas this system, I don't know, it pisses me off because this is a revolution that very, very easily could have worked. But it was, there's intentional sabotage by the state because most of the sectors of the state don't want this to work. And then just structurally from the way it's set up, it's doomed to fail from the beginning. And the consequence of this is that in 1965, Ben Bella gets overthrown in a coup by basically the army, a sort of state socialist faction of the army. And they hold on to power by basically turning Algeria into an oil economy.
Yeah. And
dismantling this entire thing. And I don't know, it makes me really angry because the actual Algerian ruling class had the right idea, and then they just got completely fucked by everyone who was supposed to be leading them, or people who were supposed to be selling the stuff that they made, people who were supposed to be reinvesting, all the people who ended up with the financial control just completely screwed them. And I don't know. It's really depressing in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, right, like it doesn't have to go like this, right? You don't have to hand control of your workplace over to some fucking guy in the Department of Agricultural Waste Management or whatever, so he can use your oranges for fertilizer. Like you can simply not do this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact situation that these workers found themselves in, and maybe there was, like a degree of sort of need to get reproducing in order to solve hunger issues. But you simply do not have to do that, as many examples show. Like, I'm thinking of the collectivized farms in Spain as well, but because perhaps they would have been a better example, right? Like, I guess there it was slightly different because it was somewhat of a collectivized community that in turn collectivized the land, as opposed to like collectivizing the agricultural labor. And then you have this sort of source of labor which is not inherently tied to the land, and that, like, when there was a need, like, for instance, I'm writing a book right now, I'm writing about the Durruti column, and like they would, because they had less rifles and they had fighters, they would rotate their fighters off the front line during the harvest time and have people help with the harvest. And then they didn't need those people the rest of the year, right? So they were able to incorporate like temporary surges in labor without it being like destructive to their model, because it was, the idea was like a collective community as opposed to a collective, as opposed to like just the workplace being this island of pseudo collectivization, like you're seeing in Algeria. Also, shout out to the Iron Column, who I've been writing about recently, who solved their supply side issues by leaving the front line and raiding the cops because they didn't have enough guns either, so they simply took them from the cops. Extremely cool. Yeah.
Incredibly based.
Yeah, very based.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point that I want to end this on, which is that, this is something that contributes to the collapse of Yugoslavia too, is that if the dichotomy that got forced on people in the 20th century was you can either choose to so your choices are you get a Stalinist planned economy completely run by the state, or you get a bunch of workers cooperatives competing against each other, and those are your two models of socialism, and those both suck and both are set up to fail from the beginning because they're not actually, you're not actually doing the thing. You're not actually having the entire class as a class, abolishing itself and then also managing production in such a way that people are cooperating to produce what people need, instead of everyone fighting over instead of either the state setting a steel quota and having that be the entire goal of the economy, or 17 co-ops and all producing the exact same kind of coffee, trying to figure out who can produce it more cheaply.
Yeah.
We can do better.
Yes, we can, and we have, and that's what we should strive for, I guess. I know if people want to read about the Spanish Revolution, there's a shit ton of books on Libcom. Jose Paret's book is pretty good. The Senator and the Spanish Revolution. Murray Bookchin has a book about the heroic years of Spanish anarchism. Abel Paz has many books. You can spend time on Libcom and read a lot about collective production in the Spanish Revolution, and for free, which is nice.
Yeah, this has been It Could Happen Here. Go take over your workplace and then also help everyone else take over theirs and coordinate with each other.
Yeah, that would be very nice. And then we'll do an interview with you on the podcast.
Yay!
Woo!
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Hey, this is U.S. Olympic gold medalist Tara Davis Woodhull.
And I'm U.S. Paralympic gold medalist Hunter Woodhull.
As athletes, our lives are about having a clear path.
And a team that you can absolutely trust.
So when it came to getting the best mortgage,
we chose PennyMac.
PennyMac is proud to be the official mortgage provider of Team USA and you.
Learn more at pennymac.com. PennyMac Loan Services, LLC, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID 35953. Licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Conditions and restrictions may apply.
Welcome back to It Could Happen Here, a podcast about things falling apart and also about militant resistance, which is an aspect of things falling apart. As things fall apart, any country, you get people who crawl out of the woodwork to either accelerate that process or try to reverse it in their own lives. And some of those people use weapons to do that. Now, we've talked a bunch on this show about the various forms that militant resistance can take. We've chatted extensively on this network about Rojava. We've talked a fair amount, James Stout and I. James is on the show today, by the way. Hello, James.
Hi, Robert.
We've talked a lot about Myanmar and the Jinzi revolution there, 3D printing of firearms and kind of this war that these people have been waging in the jungle successfully in order to overthrow the military dictatorship of their country. But we haven't talked a whole lot about naval warfare. And this is because for most of history, for most of at least our recent history, naval warfare was not really a thing insurgents could engage in, right? You know, you could every now and then, if a ship was docked or something, you might be able to get off a bombing, right? Like what happened to the USS Cole. And I'm not expressing general sympathy for everybody who does a militant insurgent act, but I am talking about like the overall kind of like tactics and strategy that underline how that stuff works. And one of the things that's really changed in the last couple of years, since 2022, you could really mark it out, is that irregular non-state groups can now, to an extent never before possible, challenge the sea power of nations like the United States, which has an unquestioned, previously at least, unquestioned level of dominance in sort of conventional naval power. And when we talk about conventional naval power in the 21st century, that means aircraft carrier groups, right? The U.S. has 11 of them, which, if I'm not mistaken, is more than the rest of the world. We have a lot of fucking aircraft carriers. And previously, that was believed to be, you know, a guarantor of both dominance on sea, and if a carrier group or two is in the area, we generally, the United States, generally could count on having air supremacy. You certainly wouldn't expect it to be countered. You know, you could expect, like, for example, if we were to have a conflict over Taiwan, the Chinese Navy or the Chinese Army could potentially interdict a carrier group using ground-based, you know, ground-to-sea anti-ship missiles or something like that. But we're increasingly in an era in which these kind of irregular non-state groups have access to similar technology and have access to kind of even more bespoke technology like drone swarms that poses a unique threat to the naval dominance of the United States. And I wanted to start, you know, we've got a two-parter here. We're going to be talking about the Houthis in Yemen. We're going to be talking about the Ukrainian Navy, which does not really have much in the way of boats, but is still challenging the Russian Navy. And we're going to be talking about rebels in Myanmar. We're going to start today, we'll be talking about the Houthi. And to understand Houthi resistance to the United States and why a militant group has had such success challenging U.S. naval power, you first have to understand how they got to the point that they're at right now, where they are kind of in a lot of ways a near state actor, you know, not a world power actor, but near state actor. You know, they're probably more capable in some ways than the state of Yemen, which they are at war with.
Yeah.
And to get how they got to that point, you have to understand what happened with their fight against the Saudis. So the Houthi movement, or Ansar Allah, which means supporters of God, is a Zaydi Shia Islamist movement run primarily by members of the Houthi tribe. Zaydi Islam is a bit of an odd duck. You'll hear it described as, like a Shia segment. It's really probably more accurate to look at it as like, it's kind of in between Shia and Sunni. Of like the Shia kind of denominations, it's kind of closest to being Sunni. I'm not an expert on any of this, but it comes out of a guy named Zayd ibn Ali's rebellion against the Umayyad Caliphate, which did not succeed, but we still have the Zaydi. What matters for our purposes today is that the Houthi as a movement came out of opposition to the Yemen's president Abi Abdullah Saleh, who was corrupt as hell. He was seen as corrupt, and he was in fact corrupt as hell. And it was specifically they were accusing him of basically being bribed by the Saudis. That's where like the Houthis started the rebellion in around 2003. So they began as a resistance movement to this corrupt president Saleh. They adopted the slogan, "God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, and a curse upon the Jews," which is still their slogan. So they are not what you would call unproblematic. And again,
they're putting it out there. They don't hide it
out there. They're not hiding it. You don't have to dig for this stuff.
Yeah. They're not using the triple parentheses. They just say the thing.
Yeah. And it's, part of why we're talking about irregular naval warfare is that who knows what the next few years are going to include. It's always a long shot, but there's not a 0% chance that people listening to this will wind up engaged in some sort of irregular conflict. And it's important to understand how modern technology has changed the dimensions of how that works from like a naval perspective. So that's why we're talking about this. Now, Houthi armed activities against the Saudis really kicked off and hit a major level after the Yemeni civil war, which officially started in 2014. The new president of Yemen, who was not Saleh at this point, asked for military support from the international community, which in this case meant the Saudis, right? So the Saudis, it's called a coalition. There's technically some other people involved, but it's the Saudis, right? And the president of Yemen calls in the Saudis when his forces are kicked out of the capital of Yemen, Sana'a, by Houthi fighters. By the way, when the Houthi take Sana'a is when they get their first cruise missiles, largely just like a bunch of Scuds and stuff. So like old Soviet shit, right? Operation Decisive Storm is the name that Saudi Arabia gives to their intervention in Yemen. And a lot of people will say this is basically Saudi Arabia's Vietnam, not an inappropriate comparison to make. So the Saudis start bombing the shit out of the Houthi, and then they send in ground forces because bombing the shit out of people who are motivated never really works as well as you want it to, right?
Oh, yeah. A lot of people have been bombing a lot of people you can destroy a lot of shit. You can kill a lot of civilians.
And kill a shitload of civilians, yeah. But
many such cases if you're looking around the world right now. But yeah, one thing it doesn't tend to do is really to get rid of motivated fighters.
Yeah, when you've got an air force, everything looks like Dresden. So the Saudis try that for a while. They send in ground forces. They carry out naval blockades. None of this does much but make the Houthis more determined. And they exit this conflict. I mean, it's not like you wouldn't say completely done, but they exit this conflict with the Saudis a lot stronger, right? A lot more organized with a lot better weapons, right? And a lot of this, So by the way, I should also state that like now the Houthis are on the side of former President Saleh. It's a complicated conflict, right? Yeah. But at the end of this all, they have a shitload of Iranian weapons because Iran is a geopolitical enemy of Saudi Arabia, and they see the Houthis as allies. And so they spend a lot of time during this conflict shipping in AGTMs, which are wire-guided missiles that are just aces at blasting holes in Saudi Arabia's tanks, which are U.S. supplied, if I'm not mistaken, as a general rule.
A lot of Saudi Arabia stuff is U.S. and
most of it, right? Much of it, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of contractors over there.
Yeah, and the Houthis, they make a lot of like waves and kind of people who are following irregular conflicts during this period in the late aughts because they're so successful at taking out these tanks that had previously been pretty hard to fuck up. And it's kind of, now AGTMs in Ukraine are like one of the dominant weapon systems that has shaped the battlefield environment. But this is kind of when people start to realize, oh, fuck, Syria as well. This is really going to change a lot about how armor gets used. And this is also where we start to see the first Houthi deployments of ballistic missiles, which were used they initially used them not dissimilarly to how the Germans used V2s, right, in World War II. They were terror weapons, and they're used in retaliation for Saudi Arabia's use of a terror weapon, which is U.S. jets and missiles, right? So Saudi Arabia is terror bombing Yemen, and Yemen starts firing missiles back at Saudi Arabia because, that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to quote here from an article in the National News. Quote, Houthi militias in Yemen launched ballistic, and this is from 2022. Houthi militias in Yemen launched ballistic missiles at Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia on Monday in the latest attack on neighboring states. 2 missiles were destroyed in mid-flight during the attempted terrorist attack on Abu Dhabi, while in Saudi Arabia, 1 was shot down and another missile wounded 2 civilians in an industrial area. So that gives you an idea of like where they are a couple of years ago, and these are not super advanced cruise missiles, as you can see by that kind of like casualty rate, right? They're not doing massive amounts of damage, but they cause terror, right? It's scary to know that a missile could come out of the sky and kill some of you.
Yes.
And it's, from their perspective, how else are they going to strike back? They don't have an air force in the conventional sense. But what we do see here is by being able to carry out these attacks back on Saudi Arabia, who's bombing them despite not having an air force of their own, you already see how new technology, and cruise missiles aren't new technology, but them being available to a non-state actor is fairly new. You see how that has already changed the game in terms of like, you can't really say the Saudis don't have this air supremacy. You can still say they have air supremacy because, again, the Houthis don't have much in the way of air power at this point, but they can't stop missiles from hitting their cities entirely, which is a different game than when, that's not really a possibility. The Houthi arsenal today includes a dizzying array of different Iranian, Soviet, Syrian, and indigenously produced rockets, including the Burkhan 3 missiles. These are for long-range strikes up to 1,200 kilometers, and the Badr P-1 rockets, which have a 120 to 160 kilometer range. They also have old Soviet Frog 7s, which are useful to about 65 kilometers. None of these are accurate in cruise missile terms, but they work well enough for the Houthis' purposes. The Badr P is indigenously produced. It's made by the Houthis. It's thought to be based on the Syrian Kaibar rocket. It is unguided, and experts will say it's closer to being functioning as just like dumb artillery than an actual cruise missile. UN inspectors claim, quote, it is produced locally from steel tubing, very likely sourced from the oil industry. You hear this a lot in irregular conflict in the Middle East. When I was in Mosul covering the fighting with ISIS, their mortars were made out of tubing that was like part of construction projects, I think, that traced back to the oil industry, at least some of it. Now, there are several variants of this rocket, like the Badr F and the P-1. It's not really useful going through all of them. You can find some interesting studies on this, but it's not necessary to understand their capabilities. Their most accurate missile, as far as I can tell, is the OTR-21 Tochka, which has a range of about 70 to 120 kilometers and a 480 kilogram payload. They only are believed to have a few dozen of these, although that's an estimate from an earlier report. And these were the ones they would use most regularly on ground targets during the Saudi intervention when they needed a precise strike. And I'm going to quote from an article and an analysis of their missile capability. The Houthis first fired a Tochka missile in September 2015, targeting the coalition's, that's the Saudis, Safar military base in Marib, Yemen. The strike hit a weapons storage depot and killed 60 coalition soldiers. The Houthis fired another Tochka on December 14th, 2015, targeting a coalition base south of Taiz City in Taiz, Yemen. The strike reportedly killed over 120 coalition soldiers. The most recently recorded Tochka fire took place on November 19th, 2016, landing in a desert in eastern Marib province. The target was unclear, but was likely the Arab coalition's Al-Ruwaiq military camp. So those are significant casualties. These are very effective weapons that do a lot of damage, right?
Yeah.
Now, international experts, and especially if you read just kind of like think tank analysis of what the Houthis are doing, we generally say all of this is only possible because of aid from Hezbollah and Iran, right? That's the only reason the Houthis have these weapons, right? Now, there is an arms embargo on Yemen. This has not stopped anyone from getting weapons to Yemen. It also, to be very fair here, didn't stop us from selling arms to the Saudis, even though they're bringing those arms to Yemen, right?
Yeah. It's a farcical, ridiculous notion.
I don't know who you want to get angrier at here. I'm not really convinced either side is, better than the other. Certainly the Saudis are not better, right?
Right. Yeah.
To what extent that matters, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just a shit situation for people who are trying to get on with being
yes,
alive
to not
in
get
Yemen.
blown up. Yes.
Yeah.
Really bad situation. I think that is overselling it a bit. Obviously, Iranian aid is critical to the Houthis, and that has gotten them a lot of their advanced weapon systems. So I don't want to undersell it. But at this point, they are making a significant chunk of these cruise missiles, specifically some of the less advanced ones, indigenously. So because of the state things, I think it is accurate to say that Iran was crucial to them getting to that state. But even without Iranian aid, there's probably a significant degree of time to which they could continue to produce some of these weapons because they are making them themselves.
Yeah, they make 358 missiles, right? Like loitering, anti-aircraft. Yeah.
Yes.
Even if Iran is not supplying these, it's probably worth noting that like this is an Iranian design or a concept at least, and it allows for a lot of testing, a lot of real world kind of versus like NATO or US type.
It lets
assets.
the Iranians test their weaponry, and again, I'm not trying to undersell how important they are. It's just you get a lot of like, well, if we can just cut off Iranian trade, the Houthis will collapse. And I don't really think that's accurate anymore.
Yeah, maybe.
I can't say that to a point of certainty, but I think that that's kind of wishful thinking on behalf of some people. So these are great weapons for a non-state militant group. Again, this stuff, if you think back 10, 15 years, the idea of a non-state insurgent group having access to a cruise missile library like this, not to say about like the other weapons they have, the drones and stuff they have, it would have been kind of unprecedented. That said, these are not good weapons in the modern military sense of the word, by which I mean they are not very accurate for the most part. And compared to more advanced missiles like the kind the United States, Russia, and China have, they are easy to shoot down with the kind of weapon systems aboard, say, U.S. aircraft carriers. We will discuss that more later. This is largely inconsequential to what's been happening in the Red Sea because the vast majority of naval traffic that passes by Houthi territory does not have access to, say, phalanx systems. You don't have much in the way of anti-missile systems on a normal container ship.
You have anti-bridge ramming devices. But it doesn't matter if your missile's not super accurate, if it can't defeat these expensive systems, if you're just yeeting them into a narrow channel at anything that goes past, right? Right.
Yeah. And the Houthis are aware of that. And this is, again, an intelligent strategy on their part.
Yeah.
Sometimes people get angry when you say that because they point out horrible things the Houthis have done, which I don't want to deny. But we're not talking about the overall morality of this conflict. We're talking about how these tactics work, right?
Right. Like the Nazis had intelligent and strategies as well. They were terrible fucking people. And I'm glad they lost and are mostly dead. But we would be unwise to just dismiss everything that they've innovated.
No, and likewise, the fact that the Houthis right now, that this interdiction of the Red Sea is based on an attempt to stop the genocide in Gaza, which I don't think it's going to work, but I would like it if somehow it did, that also does not have an impact on how this is working strategically, right? You are kind of setting all of that aside to just talk about how this is functioning,
Yeah.
So in recent years, the Houthis have expanded their stock of anti-ship missiles. In an article for the International Institute for Strategic Studies, a guy named Fabian Hinz writes, quote, "The parades," these are Houthi military parades, "also featured a variety of anti-ship ballistic missiles, ASBMs, and guided rockets employing Iranian infrared or imaging infrared seeker technology. The 450-kilometer range Asef appears to be a rebranded ASBM version of Iran's Fateh 313 missile, while the Tankil represents a previously unseen anti-ship version of the IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, developed 500-kilometer range Zohayar. The two designs constitute the heaviest Houthi anti-ship missiles, both with warheads of more than 300 kilograms, and are of Iranian origin. Three smaller ASBMs, the 140-kilometer range Falek, the Mayun, and the Bar al-Ammar, strongly resemble Iranian design philosophy and seeker technology, but do not precisely match known Iranian systems. They could either be Iranian systems not observed before and smuggled to Yemen, or Houthi-produced rockets combined using Iranian guidance kits, not unlike developments made by another Iran proxy, the Lebanese Hezbollah, in its precision-guided surface-to-surface missile program. Finally, the Houthis have presented an S-75 SA-2 surface-to-air missile, likely from pre-war Yemeni army stocks, modified for an anti-ship role using an Iranian guidance kit. So that's a potent and it's probably in some ways more advanced than their general cruise missile stockpile arsenal for taking out ships. Now, the Houthis are still a non-state force, and when people say online that like the U.S. is fighting Yemen, not quite accurate, because the Houthis are fighting Yemen too, right? Like the government. Yeah. If you're saying the government, you're talking about the people. Well, people in Yemen are fighting each other, right? Yeah, that is the situation. They are at war with the government of Yemen, right? That is still the case.
We're shooting missiles at Yemen, but like as a geographical area rather than as a state.
Yeah, exactly. So the Houthis did not survive years of intense bombing by Saudi Arabia, a nation with an on-paper extremely modern military, by making a lot of stupid mistakes. So when they decided to attack shipping in the Red Sea after Israel launched their genocidal campaign against Gaza, they did so with a competent plan, which was to make civilian freight travel in the area too dangerous to continue. Their stated goal here is to force damage on Israel and the Western nations who support it by hitting the only thing they care about, commerce. And their actions here have done real damage to international trade. Not exclusively Western international trade, I should note. The latest several months have seen them capture or sink a couple of merchant vessels. They've sunk one. They've hit at least 16 vessels with drones and missiles. I found a Bloomberg report with the telling title, "Houthi missiles do far more damage to trade than to actual ships," which is an interesting way to frame it.
Yeah.
And they're kind of trying to minimize what's going on here. While 16 strikes is a large number for the industry to withstand, there have been even more failed attempts. Since the Houthis began their attacks, there have been more than 60 incidents of some kind in and around the waterway, including everything from near misses to hijackings and harassment by armed militants and small boats. If you look at the damage that's occurred in most of these incidents, it has not been significant, said Marcus Baker, head of the Marine and Cargo at Marsh, one of the world's top insurance brokers. So far, we haven't seen a total loss caused by a missile strike. That changed in March when the Houthis successfully sank the Ruby Mar, despite more than a month of U.S. strikes to degrade their capability. The vessel was initially wounded and drifted unmanned for almost 2 weeks before sinking. While it listed, a Houthi representative promised the ship could be salvaged if aid trucks were allowed to enter Gaza. The Ruby Mar wound up sinking. Now, Houthi strikes have also hit at least one ship bound for Iran and another that was going to be delivering aid supplies to Yemen. At least 3 civilian sailors have been killed thus far in a strike on a bulk carrier named the True Confidence. Now, how you kind of interpret this as a success by the Houthis' stated goals, which is right to inflict enough pain on the West and on Israel economically that it forces an earlier end to what Israel is doing in Gaza, right? If that's their goal, well, it hasn't happened yet, right? That's one thing we can say, right? It has not yet. There's no evidence that I have seen that it has affected the tempo of Israeli operations substantially, you know?
Yeah, it would seem
it does not
no difference. And obviously there's an incentive for the United States and other international actors to not let this tactic succeed because you do not want a world in which I think it's not unreasonable. There's a thing called the right to protect in international law, which is probably what the Houthis are claiming they're acting under, and that's not like on the face of it unreasonable. But yes, I think the US has this very strong incentive to not let it become a thing that keeps happening.
Yeah, I'm not surprised we sent a carrier group into the area. I'm also not surprised that does not seem to be working either, right? If you are judging how the U.S. is acting and how the Houthis are acting based on their stated goals, the Houthis have not yet accomplished their stated goal with these strikes, and the U.S. airstrikes do not seem to have stopped the Houthis from being able to interdict naval traffic in the Red Sea, right? I've heard some argument that the tempo is reduced since the U.S. got there, but it's also unclear to me is they only have a limited amount of these missiles, right? Has the tempo changed because they need to marshal their ammunition effectively, or has it changed because there's been damage done to their infrastructure? I don't know that we'll ever really get a perfect answer on that, right? I know the U.S. claims that it has. We claim that our strikes have weakened them, but we always claim that, right? That's what we're going to say, right?
Yeah,
we all lived through Afghanistan, right? You're aware of what the U.S. says about shit like this.
It would look pretty bad if we were like, nah, dude, we just yeeted billions of dollars of munitions into the desert.
Didn't do shit.
Fuck all. Massive L for us.
It's unclear how much damage the Houthis have actually done to the global economy as a consequence of all this. Traffic has dropped to the Red Sea by about 35%. And since the sea carries about 20% of global trade, that's a major hit. But it hasn't stopped trade through the Red Sea either. Again, most trade is still, most of the pre-war level is still occurring. 35% is a substantial drop. That is a hit. And it's hurt a lot of people, right? It also has not wholly blocked, there's a longer route you can take around Africa to get into the Red Sea, but that makes everything more expensive too. The country hurt most is actually Egypt, because Egypt depends on the Suez Canal for about a quarter of its currency earnings, and you go through the Red Sea to get to the Suez Canal for reasons that are obvious if you look at a map, right? people who rightly see what's happening in Gaza as a crime against humanity are unlikely to care too much about the Egyptian economy, nor should they necessarily. But the bigger questions here are, can the Houthis actually force an end to what Israel's doing, and how long can they keep this up? The answer to the first question, can the Houthis force an end to Israeli aggression, is not yet. And the answer to the second question is, how long can they keep this up? I don't know. They might be able to eventually bring about international pressure through economic damage. But given the state of the U.S. presidential election, I don't see that as particularly likely a method for changing Netanyahu's behavior. The answer to the second question is, how long can they keep this up? Probably forever, right? U.S. strikes have been lauded by the U.S. as damaging infrastructure, but we don't know that that's true. Our airstrikes in the region have been launched by the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, the head of the carrier strike group in the Red Sea at present. And again, when you look at kind of like leftists analyzing this, because they don't often know much about the military, you'll get a mix of like people being like, the Houthis are going to kill a carrier, because they put out a video of like a carrier in their sights and shit. And like, I don't think so, guys. Doesn't seem likely. These are very well-defended ships, and they are very competently led. Look, I have looked into the captain of the ship. I've looked into how they have handled the considerable tempo of attacks against them. I think that these guys are operationally competent, as the U.S. tends to be. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to win. The U.S. soldiers tend to be operationally competent most of the time, and we also lose a lot, right? Because operational competence doesn't matter if the operations you're being asked to undertake have no chance of victory. And that is more or less the situation I think that these sailors are in, right? Where they're pretty good at sailing around in an aircraft carrier and not getting killed, but that doesn't mean they're going to defeat the Houthis in a meaningful way, right?
Right.
And the Houthis are aware of this. They're in a holding pattern. They understand that the primary thing that all of strategy really hinges around stopping and denying terrain to the enemy. And all the Houthis have to do to deny a significant amount of terrain to the entire West is keep lobbing missiles, often blindly, in this sea, and it will make everything more expensive for everybody, keep them in the news, and that's a win. And it's unlikely, if not basically impossible, that using current methods, the U.S. Navy and U.S. Air power in this area, based in this carrier group, is going to be able to do anything but spend a shitload of money. Now, U.S. Navy officers in recent weeks have reported attacks by both anti-ship missiles, regular cruise missiles, swarms of unmanned aerial drones, which has led to a general conclusion among people who analyze this stuff that drone swarms are going to be a significant part of naval warfare in the immediate future, right? You can overwhelm, the Houthis, as impressive as their drone swarms are for a non-state actor, cannot put together the kind of a swarm that a state actor like China, for example, could. But people are looking at how close some hits have gotten to the carriers and being like, well, shit, if you had a lot more of these things, you could really cause some fucking problems for these boats, right?
Yeah.
They have also used unmanned boats and unmanned underwater vessels. These are basically unmanned drone boats with explosives in them, right? And again, significantly more of these could potentially do some damage. Right. This is, by any account, the most direct combat U.S. naval forces have seen since World War II. And fun thing I've learned reading articles about the operation is that our jets now get kill markers for the bombs they drop.
You could be a drone ace or not a drone, a missile downing ace.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I guess it makes sense. Whatever. It doesn't look as impressive.
I did some Googling. I guess you could become an ace shooting down barrage balloons in World War I. But then
there
again,
was Ak shooting back at you,
they were very strongly defended. Yeah, it's a little different. Or V2 rockets, I guess, in World War II. I did also find out that some of the unmanned underwater vehicles are replacing more's the pity, the SEALs and dolphins that were previously in U.S. Navy service. I don't mean SEALs like...
No, literal SEALs and
SEALs,
literal dolphins.
Like literal SEALs.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, very sad. They live in San Diego. I often go past them to see them. You know what? The SEALs don't want to do war. The marine mammals, the other SEALs very much
do. Dolphins might. I remember from the documentary Sequest that they enjoy naval service.
Mm-hmm. I think
Did you watch Sequest, James?
I've not watched Sequest. I'm afraid.
It's Star Trek: The Next Generation underwater, but the role of Picard is played by the sheriff from Jaws. It's actually
fantastic. Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being exposed to more of this universe. Yeah. Look, I'm hoping that the dolphins join force with the orcas and take on the super rich with using the skills given to them by the U.S. military.
Yeah, inshallah, James. So when it comes to the economics of this conflict, and a lot of this does come down to economics, right? What the Houthi are doing is an incredibly efficient, good-ass deal for them. These drones, specifically a lot of what they've done, they fired missiles, but like those are expensive. They don't have a lot of them. I think that at this point, they would prefer to use those on ships that cannot defend against them. They have sent some manned boats, which the U.S. has fucking murked immediately, and they don't seem to be doing that anymore because it's dumb, and the Houthis didn't get where they did by repeatedly doing dumb shit. What they seem to have settled on is sending out drone swarms, both of these boats, these underwater drones, and of aerial drones. And these things can cost just a few $1,000s each. Some of the biggest ones are probably more like tens of thousands of dollars. But the Navy missiles that we use to interdict this shit, and some of these, they also have some dumber cruise missiles that are pretty cheap. The missiles we use to interdict this shit are $2.1 million a shot, right? This is all in addition to the insane cost of keeping a carrier battle group in the field and fighting. It's not at all cheap. I found one Politico article that quotes a DoD official admitting the cost offset is not on our side. Now, we have some cheaper systems that can work really well on particularly drones. They can work on missiles too. We've used them in that. These are airburst shells fired from the conventional guns on destroyers. These have worked really well, especially against drones in tests, but they're only effective from about 10 miles or less away. In ballistic missile terms, that's extremely close. You don't want to rely on these for a ballistic missile.
For error there.
And it's not even all that far away in drone terms, right? As a result, the U.S. has expanded research into more efficient anti-drone and anti-missile weapons, including what amounts to laser and microwave weapons that could be fired indefinitely for the cost of electricity. Given the nature of these weapons, that's not insignificant either, but it's a lot less than 2.1 million a shot. As is always the case, the kind of fight the Houthis are waging right now has an expiration date. Right now, any group that can put together a few $1 million to make hundreds and hundreds of explosive drones, right, which a number of groups are capable of, could at least exact a substantial toll on a U.S. carrier battle group, make it spend a shitload of money, potentially even do some damage. And again, even if this stuff hits an aircraft carrier, you're very unlikely to see that thing sink. There's a story that's worth knowing that, like, when we decommissioned one of our aircraft carriers 15 or 20 years ago, they shot it a bunch, just to see like how well it would hold up. And like
it's such a great American tradition, man.
They couldn't sink the fucker. Like you could you could kill sailors. It would be a big deal if they hit a fucking aircraft carrier and killed some sailors. Even if the carrier doesn't go down, that's a huge fucking deal. I don't know that they're capable of doing that, but it's unlikely they're going to kill one, right?
Right. Yeah, they're not going to send one to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, hard. It's hard to do, right? They're made not to sink, and they're pretty fucking big. But one can imagine kind of a future in which the war the Houthis are waging right now is rendered kind of impossible because weapons like that are positioned permanently around, say, the Red Sea, blanketing it in a defense grid that basically kill anything fired into the sea. That's something that might happen in the future if this continues. But that's also just the way war works, right? You know, the Houthis 10, 15 years ago wouldn't have been able to wage a war like this against the U.S. Navy. They fought the Navy to a standstill. That's the only way to analyze this, right? And again, that doesn't mean either side is achieving their operational goals, right? The Houthis have not ended the genocide in Gaza, and the U.S. doesn't seem to be capable of ending the Houthis. So they fought each other to a standstill in this matter, and that wouldn't have been possible 20 years ago. So, right, 20 years from now, what's going on will be different. You know, the fact that the U.S. seems to be pretty close to developing more efficient anti-drone and anti-missile weapons that are a lot cheaper to use doesn't mean that non-state actors will not find a way around those. But that is the situation we're in right now with the Houthis. And that is the end of this episode. We're going to get back to you tomorrow for part 2, where we're going to talk about irregular naval warfare in Ukraine and Myanmar. James, you got anything else to say?
No, I didn't think so. You know, a bad day to be a boat, I guess.
Bad day to be a boat. Bad day to be a drone. They're really suffering in this war.
Yeah, it's a great day to be a military contractor, which is every day in America.
God, such a good time to be a military contractor. Whether you're doing it for Iran or the United States, you are in clover right now.
Which is a massive change from the entirety of this century so far, so that's nice.
Yeah, it's nice to see the military contractors finally pick up a win.
Yeah, rare one for them.
That's been It Could Happen Here. We'll be back tomorrow.
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Hey, this is U.S. Olympic gold medalist Tara Davis Woodhull.
And I'm U.S. Paralympic gold medalist Hunter Woodhull.
As athletes, our lives are about having a clear path.
And a team that you can absolutely trust.
So when it came to getting the best mortgage,
we chose PennyMac.
PennyMac is proud to be the official mortgage provider of Team USA and you.
Learn more at pennymac.com. PennyMac Loan Services, LLC, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID 35953. Licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Conditions and restrictions may apply.
Welcome back to It Could Happen Here and our special two-part series, Irregular Naval Warfare and You, where James and I teach you how you too can challenge the U.S. Navy's dominance of the seas, or at least the coasts, for fun and profit. Actually, today, last episode, we talked about people challenging the U.S. Navy's coastal dominance. Today, we're talking about doing the same thing for the Russian Navy. So that's going to be fun. And of course, the Navy of Myanmar, which is a bit of a different class from the U.S. and Russian Navy, but no less interesting.
Yeah, still fun. Love to see a boat lose.
Yeah, well, I just like boats going down, you know? I just hate a boat.
Yeah. Us, the Orcas, many
such cases.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with Ukraine, and then we're going to throw to James to talk about our friends in Myanmar and how they have repurposed civilian technology and stolen weapons to counter a navy without really having one of their own. But first, Ukraine. In 2014, when the Russian army invaded eastern Ukraine and took Crimea, Ukraine lost a significant portion of its already not that impressive navy. Most of their boats were just taken by Russia, along with a number of sailors who defected. A lot of other sailors fled the region, leaving behind their homes in cities like Sebastopol to continue serving their country in a war that, a decade later, is still ongoing. One of these sailors, who is a Sebastopol native and had to flee his home, possibly forever, in order to continue serving his country, is the current commander of Ukraine's navy, Admiral Nezpapa. He leads a navy that is almost without manned ships, and on paper it is utterly incapable of challenging Russia's legendary Black Sea Fleet. Since the age of the Tsars, the Black Sea Fleet has been infamous as a pillar of Russian military power. However, also since the age of the Tsars, it's had a nasty tendency to get utterly housed by enemies that should have been able to beat it, right?
Yeah. It's not the first time it's taken an unexpected loot.
Yeah, it has a legendary history. That doesn't mean good. There's bad legends out there, you know?
Yeah, it's well known.
Yeah, today that enemy is Ukraine. Since the expanded Russian invasion in 2022, just 2 years, Ukraine has destroyed or badly damaged more than a third of the Black Sea Fleet, despite having no battleships or destroyers in the sea to counter Russian naval power. They have done enough damage to reopen Odessa and at least one other port on the Black Sea to international commerce, which has provided Ukraine with a crucial economic and strategic lifeline. And that's a remarkable achievement, sinking a third of the Black Sea Fleet and basically, when you reopen a port, that means that you have taken away naval dominance from a country that has a navy, and you don't. That's pretty good stuff. Over the last 2 years, Ukraine had damaged irreparably or sunk 7 active landing ships and 7 active landing ships and 1 landing vessel. I don't know the difference. They've fucked up a lot of boats. They have destroyed a submarine with sea-to-ground capability that was docked for repairs. They have sunk a cruiser, the capital ship of the entire Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva. They've also sunk a supply vessel and a handful of patrol boats and missile boats, and a number of other boats have been damaged. That's a significant rate of casualties, especially when you consider that every actually destroyed vessel, we're looking at multiple years lead time to replace. You cannot make naval vessels very quickly anymore. Back during the big dose, the U.S. did, but nobody really does that anymore. Not with the big ones, at least.
You can't just roll through that.
we were just yeeting aircraft carriers into the sea back then.
Yeah, it's true. Just fighting them out.
It'll take about a week.
Yeah, it's because Rosie the Riveter was really riveting at a high speed at that time.
She was quite a riveter. So at the start of hostilities, Turkey, which controls access to the Black Sea, forbade any additional military vessels, or at least military vessels of significant size, from entering the area. What this means, this has a significant impact on how well Ukraine strikes work, because even if Russia can replace the losses physically, they can't actually get replacements into the Black Sea easily. They can't sail new shit past the Turks. The Turks are not allowing that right now. So again, this is a situation that has kind of favored the way in which Ukraine has adapted to countering Russian naval dominance. It is possible that at the present rate of attrition, the Black Sea Fleet could be rendered inoperable in less than 2 years. Like if they keep going at this rate, it's like 18 months or something before there's not really much of a fleet anymore. Now, if Ukraine had accomplished this task with a traditional navy, using standard naval tactics, this would have been an impressive victory, given the disparity in resources between the two nations. But they have done all this with a mix of cruise missiles, many of which are produced in-country, aerial drones, and new bespoke, locally produced suicide drone boats. This irregular naval warfare has been successful enough that one Rand Corporation engineer and analyst, Scott Savitz, described the Black Sea Fleet as a fleet in being. Quote, "It represents a potential threat that needs to be vigilantly guarded against, but one that remains in check for now." And I'm going to quote from a New York Times article on the topic to provide a little more context. Ukraine has effectively turned around 10,000 square miles in the western Black Sea off its southern coast into what the military calls a gray zone, where neither side can sail without the threat of attack. James Heapy, Britain's armed forces minister, told a recent security conference in Warsaw that Russia's Black Sea Fleet had suffered a functional defeat and contended that the liberation of Ukraine's coastal waters in the Black Sea was every bit as important as the successful counteroffensives on land in Kherson and Kharkiv last year. "The classical approach that we studied at military maritime academies does not work now," Admiral Neyspapa said. "Therefore, we have to be as flexible as possible and change approaches to planning and implementing work as much as possible." That article is about a year old or so. So the Neptune anti-ship missile is one of the prides of Ukraine's nascent arms industry. Neptune missiles are credited with destroying the Moskva in April of 2022. Ukraine also has access to several Western anti-ship missiles, including the Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles. I believe the Storm Shadow comes from your folks, right, James?
It does, yeah. That's a British one, yeah.
Yeah. And these seem to be pretty effective missiles. These are obviously much more advanced. And these are modern naval weapons, right? Yeah. These are much more advanced than, for example, the weapons the Houthis have. These are the kind of things that can counter, to some extent, modern anti-missile technology. for an example of kind of how that tends to work, they used a barrage of, I believe it was mostly storm shadows, to rain death on the Crimean port of Sebastopol recently. 7 out of 18 of the missiles fired made it through Russian air defenses, and these damaged or destroyed 4 landing ships in a single strike. And these are sizable naval vessels. This is the most recent attack. Although, after I wrote this, there was another attack on the Kerch Bridge. I'm not really sure how that took place yet. That seems to have shut it down again. But that gives you an idea of like what you actually have to do, how much of these missiles you have to put in the air to get some through. And that's not too bad, right? 18 missiles, 7 get through, 4 ships down. That's a really good rate of return.
Especially when you consider that, like, we were talking in our first episode about how the US is spending significant resources on defending its carriers, right? Russia does not have the same ability to keep producing munitions.
No.
And so, like, that's a finite resource, right? Their means of defending their ships and defending really anything against missiles are a finite resource. So anytime you can, even if the ship doesn't get sunk, if the ship has to deploy one of these missiles, which the whole country doesn't have very many of, that's still a win.
Now, we are talking about irregular naval warfare, and then this is not what most people would have considered a traditional naval conflict prior to the expansion of hostilities in Ukraine. However, this is very different in the case of the Houthis. Ukraine is a state. It doesn't have a massive arms industry, but it has one, and it has the support of nations with sizable arms industries, right? So we are not talking about this part. We are going to talk about the aspects of Ukrainian irregular naval warfare that are some guys that are hobbyists building shit. This is not that part yet. But I think this information is kind of significant in that it shows the tactical use of anti-ship cruise missiles and their ability to significantly shape an operational environment even when the country using them has minimal conventional naval assets of their own. It is largely through the use of these missiles that Ukraine has been able to reopen their Black Sea ports. That matters to people seeking to understand both this conflict and the future of unconventional naval warfare. I mean, I guess you could say this is the future of conventional naval warfare, but I think we're still leaning on the unconventional side at the moment, at least in terms of how doctrine is changing as a result of this. So maybe I should update how we're defining this. But for our purposes, as people unlikely to have access to cruise missiles, but significantly likelier to find ourselves waging an unconventional war than having cruise missiles, it's more relevant to look at the new weapon systems Ukraine has developed that have helped them lock down the Black Sea Fleet using civilian hobbyists. And this is where we get to drones. Ukraine's conventional aerial drones are a mix of actual military hardware. I'm talking about stuff like the Bayraktar, the Turkish drone, which is kind of like the Predator. All right, it's like an actual military product. But the majority, in terms of numbers of drones that Ukraine is fielding, are civilian drones, or at least drones that started out as civilian technology. A lot of these are now built to be military, but they're still based on these designs that started with people hacking and cobbling together civilian drones. And outside of naval stuff, prior to the war, there had been a lot of veterans and hobbyists who were veterans trying to convince the Ukrainian military that it needed to adopt drone warfare on a large scale, the kind of drone warfare that you can do with these less expensive drones. And they received a lot of pushback until the war started. And these guys just took to the field and started fucking murking Russian armed units and infantry and killing generals and shit. And now Ukraine has integrated in a way that everyone is going to follow. Like Ukrainian battalions have companies now that are drone assault companies and line battalions. And every
within infantry, you have people or artillery using drones as forward observers.
All over. They have set a goal for this year of producing at least 1 million and ideally more like 2 million drones. And at least from what I read, that looks like very plausible. And most of these are quite small, right? But that doesn't mean obviously ineffective.
I know they buy a lot of their drones in the UK because the UK has consistently kicked itself in the nuts when it comes to Brexit. Mm-hmm. And so the pound is significantly weaker. And so they're able to get the drones at a cheaper price and then drive them all the way across. Yeah. I know people who have done that. I was going to go join them, but never worked it out.
Yeah. And, there are a number of different, these drones earlier in the war had an easier time being effective in causing casualties on the Russians than later. This is something that, kind of the hoopla and support, which I think is necessary that Ukraine gets, leads some people to discount the degree to which Russian forces have adapted and gotten smarter. And one of the ways in which they've adapted and gotten smarter is in blocking drones and using drones of their own. One of the stories of the last couple of weeks is that Russia has succeeded in carrying out strikes on advanced weapon systems like SAM sites deep in Ukrainian territory. They've extended their kill chain beyond what they used to be capable of, and that's because they've adapted. They're also adapted with less efficacy at blocking drones in attacks on naval vessels. Some of this has been kind of funny. I want to read a quote from a Business Insider article here. Russia is painting silhouettes on naval vessels on land to try and trick Ukraine, which keeps destroying its warships. In an intelligence update on Wednesday, the UK Ministry of Defense said that silhouettes of vessels have also been painted on the side of quays, probably to confuse the uncrewed aerial vehicle operators. They showed, there's some images of this. They don't seem convincing to me. I don't know if I think this is working.
This is great. This is, I love this. Like they have a cardboard Navy next.
Yeah, it's a very Bugs Bunny.
Yes,
but not working as well as Bugs would.
They've more painted a hole in the side of the cliff face, and drones keep crashing into it.
Ukraine keeps throwing drones at it. It's very funny. I mean, obviously, Ukraine just sank or badly damaged 4 boats. So I don't think I haven't seen evidence that this is working well. Their actual jamming efforts have been much more successful, right?
Yeah, they always will be on civilian. One of the things that's really interesting compared to Myanmar is that Ukraine tends to rely on modified off-the-shelf civilian drones, right? Your DJIs, that kind of thing. In Myanmar, because of where a lot of the PDFs are, because, they increasingly do control the borders, but they haven't always. They have been making their own drones. It's a group called Federal Wings. You can find them on Telegram, who make their own drones. And I think those seem to be less the jammers that the SAC that the Tatmadaw has are Chinese made. They're like jammer rifles. You see them all the time in captured weapon caches, but they don't seem to be having as much impact on these homemade drones, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And it's, I've mentioned a couple of times, we're doing this in part because the odds that people listening might be involved in an irregular conflict are not zero. What I think about when I say that is not that there's high odds for any individual person fighting themselves in that situation, but there is, given the number of people who listen to this podcast, probably someone who is not currently involved in a conflict that will find themselves that way in the future. And I base that in part on the fact that all of our friends in Myanmar who are currently fighting a war were a couple of years ago delivery drivers and, playing PUBG online and not really thinking they would wind up as insurgents.
Yeah, I've spoken to a number of people who are currently fighting, not in Myanmar, who have listened to our Myanmar podcast and realized the capacity of 3D printing to be very useful. And so, even in that sense, it's already happening. But no one in Myanmar... they, like many of them said, their entire combat experience was playing PUBG. And now they are murking ships.
Yeah. So anyway, it bears thinking about this stuff. And this brings me back to Ukraine's irregular drone warfare units, which again, a lot of these guys started out as civilian enthusiasts who responded to the outbreak, or at least expansion of hostilities, by expanding their hobby into a real-world military effort that had a real-world effect. Civilian drones were crucial in the Battle of Kyiv, allowing Ukraine to do severe damage to that massive Russian armored column heading towards the city, and providing intel that led to the assassination of multiple general-level officers. So it is perhaps not surprising that Ukraine looked to the same group of volunteer hobbyists when it came time to expand their naval arsenal. And there's a really good article I found in CNN by Sebastian Shukla, Alex Marcotte, and Daria Tarasova. And I actually want to give you the title of this article. Yeah, I'll try to throw this in the show notes. Is Exclusive Rare Access to Ukraine's Sea Drones, part of Ukraine's fight back in the Black Sea. Haven't really seen the word fight back used that way, but there you go. So I'm going to read a quote from that article. A government-linked Ukrainian fundraising organization called United 24 has sourced money from companies and individuals all around the world, pooling funds to disperse it to a variety of developers and initiatives from defense to soccer matches. The entire outfit is very security conscious, insisting on strict guidelines on filming and revealing identities. Those who CNN met with declined to give their full names or even their ranks within Ukraine's armed forces. On a creaky wooden jetty, a camouflaged Sea Drone pilot says he wants to go by Shark. In front of him is a long black hardshell briefcase. He unveils a bespoke multi-screened mission control, essentially an elaborate gaming center, complete with levers, joysticks, a monitor, and buttons that have covers over switches that shouldn't accidentally be knocked, with labels like Blast. The developer of the drone, who asked to remain anonymous, said their work on Sea Drones only began once the war started. It was very important because we did not have many forces to resist the maritime state, Russia, and we needed to develop something of our own because we didn't have the existing capabilities. So again, these are hobbyist design. I mean, this guy's not really a hobbyist anymore, but that's how he started. He's only not a hobbyist because the military recognized the value of what he was doing. And the current iterations of this Sea drone weigh a little over 2,000 pounds with an explosive 661-pound payload, a 500-mile range, and a max speed of 50 miles per hour. That is a significant weapon system. Yeah. Multiple Sea drones have been used to strike Russian assets in the Black Sea, and drones were involved in a successful attack that severely damaged the Kerch Bridge last July, rendering it impassable until September. So these have had a real battlefield effect, and they probably will continue to do so. The developer of these drones told CNN, "These drones are a completely Ukrainian production. They are designed, drawn, and tested here. It's our own production of hulls, electronics, and software. More than 50% of the production of equipment is here in Ukraine." And that's really significant because, I think we're all aware of the difficulty Ukraine has had getting weaponry lately from the West as a result of fucking around in Congress. And so it is a necessity for them to be able to develop weapon systems like this that can interdict and counteract more advanced and expensive weapon systems and can be produced indigenously. I don't think we have seen a mass suicide boat attack. I'm interested in what happens when we do, like with more significant numbers than we've seen deployed. I kind of wonder the degree to which the Russians have gotten good at spotting this stuff. I've come across at least a couple of stories of these boats likely destroyed on approach, so they certainly don't always work, or even a majority of the time. But given the cost of these things, they don't have to get through the majority of the time for it to be very much worth it, right? Now, in that interview with the New York Times, Admiral Nej Papa cautioned that Ukraine is still outgunned in the Black Sea, even though the Russians no longer have supremacy. They still have air superiority. They are still able to launch from the sea long-range missiles at Ukrainian targets, including civilian targets. So this is not, again, a situation that should be portrayed as them having their own way. Their ability to kind of interdict the sea has been, the primary effects of it have been, number one, the reopening of trade in the Black Sea. And earlier in the war, by locking down the ability of these landing ships to put more troops on ground and by doing damage to the Kerch Bridge, they were able to slow Russian reinforcements and Russian materiel from entering the war zone in order to, and this aided in some of the advances, particularly in areas like Kherson. At this moment, the situation has changed because, again, the Russians aren't just kind of sitting around doing the same thing over and over again, or at least not always. And we don't tend to talk as much about successes on the Russian side of things, but that is an important part of the story. And one of the things the Russians have done is kind of acknowledge that the Black Sea Fleet may not be a fleet in being forever, and certainly cannot be relied upon to handle everything they initially thought it would handle. And so Russian engineers spent a significant period of time building a sizable new railroad that connects Rostov in southern Russia to Mariupol in occupied southern Ukraine. This has allowed them to get high-volume shipments into the area and supply troops to the area along Ukraine's southern front without relying on that bridge or relying on naval landings, right? So the fact that Ukraine has been able to take out 4 landing ships recently is good. That's a win for Ukraine. It reduces Russian capability, but it does not have the same effect that it would have had, for example, 2 years earlier, right? Yeah. Because Russia has also evolved. And among other things, railroads are a lot easier or a lot harder to destroy, to take out, right? It's easy to damage a railroad, but they're easy to fix. It doesn't take a lot to get some guys over to fix a damaged, sunk of railroad. Fixing a bridge that's been blown up or a sunk boat is a lot harder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there are people within Russia even who are sabotaging railroads. But as you say, it's very high stakes for them, and it's relatively low cost for the Russian state to fix that stuff. So it's not as effective.
Yeah, but I think this gives you an idea of kind of what we're looking at when we look at this kind of ongoing irregular conflict is the side that does not have access to a functional navy, not able to interdict or destroy fleets, but able to stop them from dominating the coast. And when you can stop them from dominating the coast, you have effectively denied them terrain that they can act in without being countered. And you have also denied them from stopping you from acting in that same terrain. Even if you don't have total safety in that area, that opens up the operational possibilities substantially. And this is something that I kind of don't think is going to get put back in the bag, even if some of these Star Wars-ass weapon systems do come out in the near future. Maybe that'll have an impact in the immediate term on people like the Houthis, but I don't think that it really will on for example, what Ukraine's doing, right? Like
Russia can't keep up with getting decent small arms, body armor, grenades and shit. There's no way it's going to implement some kind of massive Star Wars system over its navy. Not right now, not in the middle of a conflict that it's struggling to supply.
Yep. You know what? Here's an ad break.
All right, we're back, and we are traveling around the world. Spin your little globe in your head and look for Myanmar, which is, of course, in Asia. Now, I'm talking about two different, I guess, anti-ship sabotage or attack, or two different ways that ships have been sunk in Myanmar. I'll start with the first one, which is undoubtedly the flashiest, just because it's fun. So a ship in the port of Yangon about a month ago, so we're recording on the 20th, it's about the 1st of March. It was in the river, in the river in Yangon, right? And it was allegedly carrying jet fuel. Now, if you follow Burmese activists, people in the Burmese freedom movement, one of their demands for a long time has been to stop supplying the junta with jet fuel, which would in turn stop it being able to bomb villages, schools, civilians, PDF formations, just about anyone in the country. It's bombed at some point in the last couple of years. And they haven't been successful, right? They haven't been able to stop the supply of jet fuel coming to the junta. So they've taken it into their own hands. And what they did on the 1st of March was that they snuck onto a boat. This is the story from the Burmese National Unity Government's Ministry of Defense, anyway. Combat divers snuck onto this boat, planted a kilogram of TNT, or a charge equivalent to a kilogram of TNT. Robert and I have both spoken to people who make explosives in Myanmar, so we definitely know the PDF has access to a range of explosives.
Yeah.
They set it on a 5-hour fuse, and it blew up in the middle of the night. And there's definitely footage of the ship on fire having blown up. Now, this is pretty remarkable for a number of reasons. This is why the United States has units like the Navy SEALs, right? Like the higher speed guys, because it is not easy to scuba dive across a harbor, climb onto a ship, set an explosive charge without being detected, and then leave that ship and have the charge go off and sink the ship without you being compromised, without the charge itself being compromised and the ship being saved, right? This is some classic, this is why there are special units within the US military. Now, the PDF very obviously did not have combat divers 2 years ago. I was looking into hobby scuba diving in Yangon. The rivers in that area are extremely muddy and visibility is very low. So the people who you find diving in that area are not so much like hobby scuba divers or free divers, but they're salvage divers. There's a whole little industry of people, and these people are diving in equipment that I would not consider safe or reliable. It's clamping an air hose in between your teeth and diving down and trying to find... there's a large deposit of coal in one of the rivers in Yangon because of a ship that sunk. There's, of course, copper, which everyone all around the world, including the Viet Cong in Santee, are stealing copper. There's iron, right? So these people are diving down and trying to collect scrap and sell that for whatever minimal amount they can, right? It's an extremely dangerous and extremely low income. It's one of the sort of really high risk, low reward jobs that you get in economies where people are really struggling to make ends meet, right? So those are the only divers I can find evidence of in Yangon. I don't think it was them who did this, because you have to have a boat above you with a pump if you're diving with a rubber hose in your teeth, right? So it seems like somebody within they said it was a Yangon PDF. That's who they attribute it to. So that would be one of these. It would likely be an underground group within the PDF, right? Some people living in the city who were able to sneak onto this boat, set a charge, and blow it up. And they would also have to have intelligence at the boat, where it was, what it was carrying, etc. So it's a pretty daring mission. This is the first one like this we've seen, and we haven't seen anything since. But it's of course possible that this is a story that we're being told. In fact, they had like someone undercover on the ship, right? Or like they had some other means of getting this charge onto the ship. But one way or another, they managed to blow up this ship carrying fuel. which is a significant detriment to the junta, right? That's how they get most of their shit. It's not over land, especially with more
the
and
terrain
more.
there is just absolutely, like, even with modern technology, difficult to get significant amounts of shit through.
They're resupplying some of their outposts that are 10 miles from a town with helicopters right now. Like, A, the terrain is burly, and B, they don't have... The PDF has denied them access. That any time they send out a convoy, it gets attacked. So sending out... Plus, their land border crossings are increasingly falling into the hands of the PDFs and the EROs. So getting stuff through the ocean is one of the ways that they can still get stuff. And if this keeps happening, then they will make that more expensive for them, and they're not exactly a wealthy junta. Even though I guess Min Aung Hlaing just made himself an Air Force One recently. I was just looking at it today.
That's good.
He's
Good
got
for
himself
him.
2 luxury. Yeah, they called it dictator class. Like he's upgraded from president class to dictator class.
Yeah.
Yes, he has. In many ways. So yeah, that's one way that the PDF has been blowing up ships in the Yangon River. Robert, do you know who else has been blowing up ships in the Yangon?
Well, we are sponsored entirely by the British Navy circa the mid-1800s, so I would guess them.
That's right. Yep.
It's
Lots of repressed feelings and blowing up ships.
A lot of cabin boys with deep trauma. Anyway, here's ads.
Yeah. All right, we're back. We hope you enjoyed that ad pivot, one of our best ones yet. And we're talking about the Arakan Army now. So the Arakan Army are not to be confused with the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, different group. Arakan is a name of what is now Rakhine State before it was colonized by the Burmese. That was, I think Arakan was a king before it was colonized by the Burmese. So that's what that refers to. It's a geographical appellation rather than like necessarily an ethnic one. The Rakhine would be the ethnic group. So what the AA have done is sunk, I think, at least 4 junta ships now. Now, most of these ships are they're like they look like big Higgins boats. They're like landing craft or like car ferries, like flat bottom with a bow that goes down, right? I rode around a lot in the Marshall Islands in little landing craft like that because they can get them in. They don't have like docks, so they can just ride that right up to the beach and then drop the front and off you go. And they use them a lot. The junta doesn't have like per se marines, so they don't have maritime infantry, but they use them to transport their regular army around, right? And they use them to transport them upriver. They also use them a lot in Rakhine State to shell AA positions and any townships that they've decided they want to wipe off the map and kill all the people in, right? So these boats have been a real thorn in the side of the Arakan Army after Operation 1027, when they joined with 2 other groups to form the Three Brotherhood Alliance and launch attacks on the junta all over Myanmar. And so what they've been doing, it appears, is using underwater mines to sink these ships, which is interesting, right? Like I guess the mines are like a very old technology, right? Like it's probably 100 years plus underwater mines have existed. It seems the way that the reason they're able to get away with using what is a relatively dated technology is because the junta just doesn't expect to encounter anything, right? And so has not equipped its ships as such. They do have stuff like submarines, but that's not what's getting sunk. What's getting sunk are these big kind of landing craft riverboats. And it seems that they're using mines, and then once they disable the ship, they're then attacking it with small boats, small arms, like indirect fire mortars and stuff.
Yeah.
I saw one post that suggested they'd use, which is pretty cool if they did. The Burmese military has these tank destroyers, self-propelled. It's a tank. It's a tank is what it is. And they've captured, the AA has captured a number of these, right? And I've seen suggestions that they're using some of these on, they just set up an ambush along the banks of the river, right? And as the ship comes in, they can maybe disable it with a mine and then attack it with those. But there are videos online, you can find them, of the AA sinking these ships, and then they've done some amazing drone photography of they then staged their units on the ships, all saluting the drone, and they had the Arakan Army flags, and they're actually really cool photos of them taking these ships. But again, I think this might be the first sinking of a Burmese naval ship since independence from Britain. Like I can't think that they really haven't played much of a role at all in its conflicts with the EROs, aside as from like basically kind of just shelling places when they want to do that. But there's never really been any significant opposition to them, and that's changed now. They have to, obviously, just like everywhere else, watch out for drones, right? Drones have been used to a massive extent in Myanmar. And like the AA doesn't have as many like associated PDFs. I haven't seen them doing as much of the drone stuff as the PDFs. The PDFs tend to be like the more urban folks, right? The younger folks, the Gen Z folks that we've spoken about before. And a lot of them have been very savvy with their use of drones. Like I said, you can look up Federal Wings and you can see them dropping bombs with drones on all kinds of stuff with their heavy metal soundtracks that they like. But it wasn't even drones here. It was pretty simple. It was just mines. So they do love mines in Myanmar. There's a lot of mines all over that country. But in this case, these, I guess, massive mines in the rivers, given that the junta is the only entity sending big boats up and down, you could set them at a certain depth where these small boats wouldn't hit them, and eventually one of the junta boats is going to hit them, I guess. And so it's pretty basic technology, but it's still a massive step forward in terms of like a place where the state had complete impunity. It now doesn't, right? They can't just cruise up and down these rivers shelling people. They were actually using some of the ships to evacuate soldiers and their families from a position. The soldiers, they were trying to like rather than surrendering, they were trying to evacuate them and move them to somewhere else. The AA asked them to surrender and they didn't. They tried to evacuate them, so then they mined the ships and took those out. I think the junta has like tried to spin this as like the AA is attacking civilians, but I think a Burmese Navy ship with a Burmese Navy flag when the ships have just been shelling you seems like a legitimate target to me. I think it's very hard. It's the junta who put children on one of their naval ships rather than the AA who attacked the ship because it had children. You can hear in one of the things, you can hear the AA are like attacking the ship in small boats and they're shouting like there are children on board, and you can hear them acknowledging it. And there are videos of the AA rescuing people who jumped overboard, rescuing them from the river. And then, like, I guess they're just held as POWs.
Cool.
But, yeah, it's cool. It's interesting. Obviously, not many of us have access to underwater mines, but, maybe in a fictional future we might.
Yeah. Well, there you go, folks. This has been Irregular Naval Warfare and You, a podcast about irregular naval warfare and you.
Yeah. Send us your videos of yourselves engaging in irregular naval warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. Go out there. Look, how about this? Every listener, go out and sink one naval vessel, Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter whose. Just any boat. Go sink a boat. Any boat.
Mm-hmm.
Go take out
a fucking
boat.
super yacht?
Knock it out. You see a dinghy. Take that fucker out. People kayaking, fuck them up. You know?
Banana boat?
Absolutely, a banana boat for sure. Yeah. One of those weird duck boat car things that they have in some cities.
I'm in San Diego.
Actually, you know what? You don't need to do anything with that. That'll kill everybody on board on its own. Those things are death traps.
Just pray for those people.
Yeah.
But any other boat, you see a donut, behind a speedboat.
Oh yeah. Murk it. Anyway, everybody, go away. Hey, we'll be back Monday with more episodes every week from now until the heat death of the universe.
It Could Happen Here is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more podcasts from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find sources for It Could Happen Here updated monthly at coolzonemedia.com/sources. Thanks for listening.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time, 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
sink into affordable luxury. Anabay is the only machine washable sofa, inside and out. With stain-resistant slip covers and a cloud-like frame duvet, everything goes right in the wash. Plus, the modular design lets you change the look of your space anytime. Visit WashableSofas.com to upgrade your home. Shop up to 60% off site-wide, with sofas starting at just $699 and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Shop now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
Hey, this is U.S. Olympic gold medalist Tara Davis Woodhull.
And I'm U.S. Paralympic gold medalist Hunter Woodhull.
As athletes, our lives are about having a clear path.
And a team that you can absolutely trust.
So when it came to getting the best mortgage,
we chose PennyMac.
PennyMac is proud to be the official mortgage provider of Team USA and you.
Learn more at pennymac.com. PennyMac Loan Services, LLC, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID 35953. Licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Conditions and restrictions may apply.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.